before that we were guessing.
There we go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the North Ogden City Council. We appreciate you being here, and we'll go ahead and get started. First up this evening, we're going to have an invocation and pledge of allegiance, and we've asked Councilwoman Stoker to offer an invocation for this meeting and then lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
Father in heaven, we're thankful for this area in which we live in and the beauties that surround us. We're grateful for the summer that we've had and the sun that is provided for our crops that be able to grow. We ask thee that thou will be with us this night as we discuss things on the agenda, that we will be able to do so in a civil manner and listen to all sides as they in all directions. We're thankful for the opportunity we have to serve the residents of North Ogden and are grateful for them and their participation and their concern and their willingness to be involved. Again, we thank thee for all we have and say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Please stand and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilwoman Stoker. We'll go next to public comments. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's anything you would like to share with the members of the City Council about any of the items tonight on the agenda or anything else, we invite you to please come forward now. Just ask for your name and address at the start of your comments for the record of the meeting.
My name is Steve O'Bray, and my wife Carol O'Bray is here. We live at 3185 North, 100 West in North Ogden. What I wanted to comment on today is we had talked about the impact fees and the building permits last week. Today I spoke with House of Representative Gage Frohr. He represents us, in this area, and is at the state level. And I talked to him about the impact fees, and he said that the state gets blamed for a lot of things that is not so, and he said this is one of them. He said that the impact fees, the only thing that the state has done is they send out a letter of request to all the different communities, because there were quite a few complaints of the impact fees being, felt like they were being way too high, and it was adding a lot to the person who was wanting to build. And he said, so they send a letter out and requested that the cities send a justification letter as to why their impact fees were as high as they were. But he said that they did not regulate these in any way whatsoever, as far as if you give any variances that you don't have to make up the difference. That was his comment, and that was today. And so, to me, I'm saying that I think that the city is the ones that can dictate how high those impact fees are going to be. And then he went into quite a lengthy discussion as to what impact fees versus which he felt like should be at the beginning of a construction project versus taxes to support the infrastructure. And he thought that many of the communities were not keeping the taxes high enough to keep the infrastructure going properly, and so they were trying to make up for it by making higher impact fees. That was his comment. However, and he says, on a new subdivision, when they're putting in roads and all the utilities and everything, then the impact fees are greater. If they're in a lot that's already in an area where it was an improved lot when it was purchased, and all the the utility fees are stubbed in, or the utilities are stubbed in there, and the road is in front, and the gutters are there, then the impact fee shouldn't be as great. Not that it has to be equal all the way through for every single building project, but was from Representative Frohr. And so I just wanted to comment on that and give that to you. That's who I talked with today. Is there any comments or anything?
Thank you, Mr. Aubrey. We'll definitely cover these questions you've raised during the discussion a little bit later in the agenda when we get to the impact fees.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I appreciate this opportunity. It's my first city council meeting, and I'm very impressed with the city and the jobs that you all do.
Thank you, and welcome to your first meeting.
And I love your Facebook page. I gotta say, I'm a frequent contributor. The reason I'm here today is
we just need your name and address. Sorry, at the start.
That's all right. First time.
Although I know you from Facebook.
You do. I'm the one with the cat on my shoulder in her picture. My name is Deborah Eddy, Eddy, and I'm at 526 East, 3525 North. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to ask if the council would consider amending a law that's already on the books that has to do with the emissions of toxins into the atmosphere. Currently, I've done some research with the city. I came over yesterday and talked to a compliance officer, and she did some very helpful research for me and determined that currently if you have a business license that you're held accountable for any kinds of fumes or emissions that might go out and affect other people in the community. But there's nothing in place for folks who might be participating in those same activities but as a hobby in their own yards. And the reason this has come up is there's an individual in my neighborhood, and I'm not going to name names. I've tried to work this out with him one-on-one, but unsuccessfully. But he has a teenager who has a hobby of working on off-road vehicles in the backyard. And, you know, it's been going on for several weeks, and I think it's a great hobby. I think it's a much preferable hobby over playing video games or getting into trouble. And even the noise, you know, I can deal with the noise. But I have limited hours each week that I can do my yard work. I work full time. I have weekends, some evenings to do it. And very frequently when I go out, for some reason, this hobby always requires throttling the engine full blast, and there are literally clouds of carbon monoxide coming up and then settling down in my general direction. And, you know, like I said, it's been going on for a while, and so I would just say, well, I'll go in the house and come back later, but it was kind of actually disrupting my work for several weeks. So Saturday, I don't know what came over me. I found my feet going over to the gentleman's front door, and I explained the situation. I said, hey, you know, your son's doing this, and the fumes are really killing me, is the way I put it. And not to draw this out, but in a nutshell, he just said, it's my yard. My son can do what he wants in my yard. And, you know, I tried the let's be good neighbors approach, but didn't get anywhere. And so I said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I said, I don't know what the rules are, but I'll find out. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why I went and did some research with your compliance officer. And I was kind of surprised to just find out that, for example, if his son had a business license and was doing that work in his yard, he would be held accountable for the exhaust. But because he's doing this as a hobby and not as a business, it's allowed to continue. So I would just ask that you just consider maybe tweaking the law a little bit so that folks like myself have some recourse to be able to say, you won't do it just to be a nice neighbor, but would you do it because this is the law?
Thank you, Ms. Edie. Actually, if you could maybe just come give our city administrator your email address, then we could get some follow-up discussion back to you.
I'd be
Since
glad to
that's
do that.
not on the agenda today for discussion, but then we could get some follow-up to you. So,
Shall I do that now? Or
Questions?
sure. There's questions though first, Councilman Uri.
I guess first question I'd have is if that hobby involves just working on his own vehicles or other people's.
And I honestly don't know. We do have a fence around the property, but unfortunately it can just waft up and over. So,
And then, John, the other one I'd ask is, what would our noise ordinance have about something like that?
So noise ordinance would basically say you can go till 10 p.m. at night.
No matter how loud it is.
Because it basically puts all power equipment or vehicle noise in the same category, and it's basically 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay.
is there anything else? All right, thank you. Should I give him that information now?
Yes, please, if you would, that would be helpful. Okay, anyone else? Okay, then we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda. We have some special folks in the audience this evening, some talented, beautiful young ladies who are representing our community, and we're going to do some presentations from them. But first, we want to invite our pageant director, Hannah Goodrich, up to make some special introductions here to the City Council, and we appreciate all of your work for, are we 3 years now?
This was our fourth.
This was
Yep.
fourth. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
4 years since we reestablished the Miss North Ogden and now the Miss North Ogden Outstanding Teen Pageant, and it's been better and better every year. So thank you for all your work and welcome. We're glad to have you back.
No, we're happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. First and foremost, thank you again for your support of our program. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and I know a lot of others are as well. We're so proud of our program. We've grown quite a bit in the past few years, and it's funny because we have judges from all over the state come and judge our program on the night of the pageant. And we always have so many wonderful comments about North Ogden City and our production and also our amazing young women who are a part of our program. So we're really just grateful to have it. We are really proud of all of our contestants, and we have some amazing girls here in the audience with us, our royalty members who placed at the competition. And I'll have them stand, I'll name off their names and just have them stand. And then I've also asked them if it's okay just to come up and give a brief summary about their platforms, because I think it's really, I think we all get caught up in the actual production side of things, the competition and all that. But the heart of our organization is service, and it's what our organization is based on. And so these young women have done so much for their platforms already and plan to do so much in the future. And so I'd really love them to just share just a quick, brief summary about what they're doing, because I think that that's kind of the crown jewel of our program. So I'll just have them stand really quick so I can name them off so you can kind of put a face to a name. So with our outstanding teen contestants, our first attendant is Olivia Buck. And our Miss North Ogden's outstanding teen for this year is Gracie K. Nichols. And then our second attendant to our Miss program actually last week won Miss Kaysville Fruit Heights. She was able to compete because she attends school at the DATC. And so we're really proud of her and happy for her that she's going to be able to go on and serve that city. We have our first attendant here, Jillian Lundgren. And then our Miss North Ogden for 2017 is Abigail Lang. Thanks, ladies. You can sit down. So we're really proud of our girls, and we're also proud of our outgoing queens. They represented us so well last year, not only at the state competitions. Our outstanding teen won several awards at Miss Utah's Outstanding Teen, but also our Miss North Ogden was honored to be in the top 12 at Miss Utah, and they both accomplished so much with their platforms and their community service, so we're really proud of them. So I will just turn the time over. We'll start with our teens and go to our Miss and just give them a few minutes, if that's okay, just to talk about their platforms. So we'll start with Olivia Buck.
And I'm going to take some pictures, so don't mind, okay?
Oh, okay. I'll just try to keep talking. But so my platform that I chose to do for this pageant is on literacy. I'm very passionate about literacy. And through this opportunity of being able to be in the pageant, I've been able to serve so many people. One of the first things that I did with my platform is that I went to Bates Elementary and did a book drive for them. They have this take-home library system, and the students just take them home and read them with their parents. And they needed some more books to be leveled so that it's higher interest and the kids want to read them. And so the kids brought in 1,101 books, which is really amazing, and I was able to put in some hours and to level them for the students, and so now this next coming year they will be able to have more variety in their library, and I think that is super important for children to be able to get books that they love to read and want to read and are excited about reading. And then another thing that I've been able to do with my platform is I've been able to volunteer at the Treehouse. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's just like a museum for children, and they do all these cool things for them. And I've been able to volunteer there, and I've kept volunteering after the pageant was over, and I really love it. And I've been able to stuff bags for them, and it's books on how to prepare children for kindergarten, and they have like an activity book and then the actual story that goes with the bag. And this Saturday is actually their ramp program, and I will be going there this Saturday to help and volunteer with them and get children excited to learn and read their kindergarten books and get excited about kindergarten. And then another thing that I've been able to do that is really special for the community, I think, is I came up with the idea of the lending library, and that is going to be over here by the police station. And I went to Will Wright Lumber, and they agreed to donate the materials needed. And I also have an amazing guy, Gary Stoker, who volunteered to assemble that for me, and he's been really swamped with a lot of projects since it's like the summer and everything, but hopefully we'll be able to get to that soon, and we'll be able to get that set up. So I'd just like to thank you for your time, and I hope to serve this community well.
Thank you, Olivia. Great report. Appreciate everything you're doing with reading and 1,101 books. That's awesome. Okay, welcome, Gracie.
Hope you guys don't mind. I had to bring up some cards because when I don't, I forget everything I'm saying. So my platform is Music as Medicine, and I bet you every single person in this room has been affected by music, even if you think you haven't. Have you ever watched a scary movie without music or without the sound? I've tried it. It's not that scary. Or
I'm afraid I do that. Mute it for a minute.
Oh, yeah, I think everyone does. Or church always has music, even if you don't attend church. If you ever have gone to a meeting with a friend or someone else, the music is really empowering. And if you ever read behind the lines and actually read what they say and take it into your mind, you can really get a lot out of it. It's really interesting, and it was really amazing to do that. Also, with TV, I already said that, it's kind of like movies, but if you watch TV and you're watching something funny, or you're watching something dramatic, or a love story, let's say you're getting all tied up in this great series, I know I have, then without the sound and without the beautiful music, it's really hard to really feel the emotion that they were feeling. So music speaks to the soul, in my opinion, and music is an international language. It's the only international language, in my opinion, because you can communicate through music with someone all the way across the world who has never heard English in their life, and they would still understand your emotion. I have been writing music for a long time, and it has been amazing to me to let the emotion out and to let other people take in the emotion. And it's a really amazing experience, too, to take in other people's emotion through their music. So I think that music should never be left out of the human experience. My platform covers 5 areas, which are mental, spiritual, physical, social, and academic. They help in so many ways. I decided through my platform and my service to focus mostly on the mental part. Not only has music helped heal me mentally with if I'm sad or if I'm upset, or it has helped me get through anxiety quite a bit, but I also found out that music is the last thing to go in Alzheimer's and dementia patients. So for my service, I went around to lots of care centers and lots of dementia and Alzheimer's units, and I played for them, and every time they wouldn't know who I was, but they would know the music. And it was amazing to see them be so forgetful and not know what was going on, but they would know the music, and they would feel that, and they would understand. That would be one of the only things that they would understand out of the day is the music and that the emotion that I brought to them, and I thought that that was very amazing. So, yeah, and President Trump is currently trying to cut the art funding, and I would like to fight that and let everyone know how important music and the arts are. At my school, we only have one teacher, and she covers music, and she covers drama, she covers choir, and she does the school plays. We would also like to have a lot more classes including music in our school, but unfortunately we don't have enough of the funds to do it or enough teachers. And I think that that's really important because in my choir class, people can be themselves, and I feel like that's the only part of my day when I can relax and not feel judged, not feel worried, not feel stressed out. It's the time when I can be myself and let my emotion out and share it with other people, and it's great to see other people be themselves too. So music is so important, and it can help us in so many ways that medicine can too. So I would like to go down to the Utah legislator for my platform, or legislation. I probably said that wrong, but
Legislature.
Yeah, okay.
Very close.
Thank you. My handwriting on here is a little bit crazy, so it was hard to read legislator. But I would like to go down to them and talk to them about the funding issues and try and see if we could work that out, because music has been such a great class, and not everyone is amazing at math. I know I for sure am not. And they're not amazing at English, or they're not great at other things, but music has helped me with math, and it has helped so many other kids, not only with academic skills, but it has helped them be better as a person and to learn about themselves. That's why I really think that music is a fundamental subject and that it needs to be more funded in our community. And so the last thing that I would like to leave you guys with is the next time you want to pop a pill in for whatever it is, if it's for pain, if it is for sadness, if it is for anything, before you pop in that pill, maybe try music first. And if that doesn't work, then you should try music along with the pill. And from personal experience, music is amazing, and it can help heal so many things. So thank you.
Thank you, Gracie. Excellent job. That you said a lot more than what could possibly have been on your cards. So that was a great job.
Gracie, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Gracie, you probably have seen it, but if you haven't, the America's Got Talent, I don't watch it, but I saw a clip, somebody put it on my Facebook page, of a young lady that's deaf and takes her shoes off and feels the music through her feet and sings beautifully.
Yeah, it's amazing. I actually have a lot of deaf friends because our school has a very big deaf program. So we have about 8 students in our school who are deaf, and I know a little bit of sign language, but I'm really bad at it. But it was weird because I would never think that they would like music because you can't hear music, but you don't have to hear music to feel music, and it was really cool hearing there are a lot of deaf drummers out there and guitarists, and I think that's really cool. So yeah. Any more questions?
Okay. Just one comment. I love your idea about going to the legislature. And so when we get to January next year, just send me an email, because we have a legislator from our city who's on the education committee. And I'll make sure he gets an appointment set up with you so that you can share your ideas with him. So
that's awesome.
That'd be great. Great. Good to get involved. Okay, Jillian, let's welcome our first attendant here for Miss North Ogden.
Well, first of all, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be speaking to all of you today about my platform. My platform is Mind Your Health. It encompasses mental health awareness. I keep this platform so near and close to my heart because I struggle with mental health. And I overcame that through many challenges and through everyday struggles. And I realized, wow, this is awesome. Anyone can get through this. And I need to share this with the community because I realized that mental health affects everyone. No one can escape from it. It affects every gender, every income, every race, just everything. I noticed that I attend Weber High School, and excuse my language, but I'm sick and tired of watching my friends and members of our community take their own lives from struggling from a mental disorder. It is so powerful and so prominent in our community, and I believe that it does not get enough recognition and enough attention that it deserves. My plan with this platform is to create an openness within the community and to talk about mental disorders and mental illness, because it is something that has been pushed to the side for so long and is such a problem and gets ignored often. In the school system, I feel like in health classes, mental health is, this is mental health, but it's not as this is diseases, and it's not, there's a stigma with it that, they're crazy, or you're have anxiety disorder or something, and that's not good. Like, you're different. But I want to break that stigma within the community, and I've talked to the counselors of Weber High School to get in more program. May is the Mental Health Awareness Month, and I want to put in place this next school year to raise awareness through that. There's a HOPE project that they do for suicide awareness, but I also want to encompass mental health because it is the same, but it's so much different. It encompasses both, but it's very different than suicide awareness. So I want to keep in touch with the counselors and keep a program going for that this next school year. I have also partnered with a project on Instagram that is raising awareness for mental health. And I've talked to them about coming and speaking to the community and starting an event like that. And I plan to continue with that and continue raising awareness for my platform in the community this next year. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Jillian. Is there any questions or comments, Council?
Thank you.
It's a great topic, very important one that's hit our community a lot, so thank you. Okay, and our Miss North Ogden, Abigail Lang, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for all the support that you lend to our program and all these wonderful girls. We really appreciate it. So before I'm pretty sure you all know what my platform is, maybe, but I'd just like to share a quick analogy or story that I read online a few days ago. So there's a wealthy man who lives in Brazil, and he drives around this $1 million Bentley. And he loves his car, and every time that people see him going down the street in this car, they're like, oh, that car's amazing, it's beautiful. And so he takes this big old backhoe onto his property and starts digging this hole. And so the people start to gather around and just curious what he's doing. And so he announces, I'm going to bury my Bentley because I want to travel around in the afterlife in style. And these people stop and they just kind of look at him, and they're like, are you crazy? You can't do that. That's such a waste. Think of all the people that could benefit from that. If you don't want it, you can donate it. Why are you doing this? And he was just so persistent. Nope. I'm going to bury it. It's going to be fine. And, I'll be so great in the afterlife. And then he stopped right before he lowered that car in, and he said, I'm not actually going to bury my car. I want you to think about it. This is how I feel, and this is how millions of other people feel in the world when you bury someone with organs who are just would mean the world to somebody else. So my platform is focused on organ donation. I have already procured partnerships with Intermountain Donor Services, Yes Utah, and Donate Life to help bring awareness to the topic. I've been at local storefronts here in the city and done polls and studies on people who are organ donors and people who are not. 40% of the residents of North Ogden are not organ donors. And when I'd ask them why not, it's more of an education, things that they've heard that aren't quite true, that I plan to correct the knowledge of that. There are so many people in our community actually needing organs. There's an event on the 28th of August for the Weber High soccer coach who has cystic kidney disease and is needing kidney transplant. So his family is putting on a fundraiser for him. And so I plan to go to that and to kind of promote that in the city to help him. I'm actually now in the process also of partnering with Intermountain Healthcare, there you go, McKinney Hospital, and then our local North Ogden Clinic, just to raise awareness. And I plan to go into the high schools, junior highs and elementary schools, especially the high school, before the kids start to get their driver's licenses, especially at that age, especially the things that they've heard. They're not going to check yes for organ donation. But once they understand it, I feel like maybe they'll change their minds a little bit. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Council. Any questions on this one? It's a very important topic, too.
Thank you.
My youngest brother, 15 years old, committed suicide, and broke our hearts. But the only good thing that came out of it was organ donations to a lot of other people to get it. So both of these last topics are very near and dear topics to me. So let's give these wonderful ladies a round of applause. We don't normally in council, but I want to thank you all for what you're doing. And actually, I'd like to ask if you'll all maybe come up here. We can get a picture quick with the city council members, if that's okay, council. So since we have you here, this is probably our only chance.
I guess we don't have a choice, do we?
That mayor would like you to all circle around him.
Come over this way so you're not around.
Wide angle lens.
Come over this
Okay, scoot over a little bit, okay.
Be all right, just to get the center three right there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, ladies. Appreciate it. This is such a wonderful program. Sometimes, especially people who are not involved might think it's just a pageant. Why are we doing this? It's just about, picking the most beautiful person physically, but it's really not. The Miss USA and Miss North Ogden pageant is about service and some really mature and important platforms, as you've heard from these ladies tonight, and all the other beautiful young ladies who competed as well. So want to thank them. And also we have a gift for Hannah, just a little thank you from the City Council for all the work you've done in getting this program going again so these wonderful young ladies can share their talents. So if we can please have you come up and get an applause also from the audience for all the work you put into this program. There's some really great lotions and stuff that John and I picked out. We just went and grabbed a couple things.
Shaving lotion if he picked it out.
So thank you for all your work. We really do appreciate you and all the young ladies that are doing great things. Okay, we'll go now to item number 3, Council, which is a discussion about a piece of property that may potentially be disposed of or sold at 525 East, 2550 North, just south of us here, next to the Senior Center. And our city administrator and attorney, John Call, will give some background on this, Council, and then we'll have discussion and kind of see where you would like to go on this item.
So, Council, we were approached and had a discussion about whether or not the council or the city had a use for this property. There have been some concerns by the residents of the HOA about the upkeep of it and just what the city's plan is with it. Originally, let me see if I can scroll down so you can see a little better. Right here is the senior center. And so this is the future parking lot for the senior center, or the future expansion. And down here we had planned on putting the detention basin in this area that serves this property, but it ended up being that it worked better to put the detention basin right here, and we didn't lose any parking stalls as a result of that because of the widths required for parking stall between aisles and things like that. And so the city doesn't necessarily have a use associated with the original plan anymore. So the neighbors there approached us about possibly purchasing the property. We can't consider or enter into an agreement to sell that property until we hold a public hearing about it. And so that's the purpose of this meeting and public hearing. There are some questions for the council to consider that I think were in my report, my staff report, which is the current resident who lives in this home is requesting that we participate half the cost on the fence here, and possibly a retaining wall if it's required, and then half the cost to do the survey work, which comes, will be about $800 for the survey work. There are some things to keep in mind. The city will, exactly how much property is going to be dedicated or given over is still a little in flux, in the sense that it can be amended. There is a 20-foot easement here for the storm line, because our detention basin that's here still has the lines that drain and then come into the subdivision and go to the south and connect to the city storm system eventually, as well as there is an easement that will stay here for the trail system to connect to the Smiths Trail that goes along the east side of Smiths. And just to kind of help you understand the connection, so residents and people can walk along this trail, connect come up and then come up a sloped access and come into the Legacy, or not Legacy, into the senior center parking lot and connect to the senior center there. That was one of the things we've planned since the beginning of this project, was to make sure there's a connection so the seniors and the folks who live south of the center are making it to the senior center as easily as they can. Some of the other things that the city had talked about using this area for, since it wasn't going to be a detention basin, was some sort of a garden, either a community garden or, just a landscaped area for people to be kind of like I hate to call it a botanical garden because it's not quite big enough, but just, kind of a resting area. And so that's the type of things that the city would do with it if we didn't sell it. What we've talked about is basically selling it for the cost the city paid for the property. We paid, no, it's in my memo, but I think we paid $65,000 an acre when we bought the property for this whole piece, this entire thing that's called Parcel B. And so we would just be selling it for essentially what we paid for it, not marking it up and not marking it down. So do you have any questions for me or anything I can answer? I know that the residents who live in this home are here to answer any questions, and I believe there's a representative from the HOA here as well.
Actually, before that, if I could add one detail to John's presentation, I had reached out first to the resident adjacent.
Oh.
So John probably didn't know that, but they did not come to the city first. When I'd asked our Parks and Recreation Director her recommendation for that parcel, she did not want to take it over as a park just because our staff is already struggling to keep up with the parks we have, but wanted to do a community garden there. And I asked the adjacent owner if they had any interest in purchasing it potentially as well. So just want to clarify that.
And so with these easements, there's not a chance for structures to go in because the easements are going to, it essentially will be green space for the HOA or for the resident there.
Councilman Turner.
So, John, on the south side of that parcel, not there, the people that live there, the house, and then where it turns, is that going to have like curb and gutter, or what's going to happen all along? And along the property that we're selling.
So there is curb and gutter. It's essentially a hammerhead designed street, and there's curb and gutter. And if I remember right, there's sidewalk on one side, but the HOA might be able to answer that better than I can, because I think there's just sidewalk on one side of this street right now, and that's all that was planned, because this is technically a private street. Okay, so there's sidewalk on both sides? Oh, on one side, okay. So, and so, but it's a private street, and so it's plowed and maintained by the Legacy HOA.
How much property is it, John?
So the way that it's been drawn out, it's basically this dotted line all the way here. The exact dimensions, because there has been some discussion about maybe the city doesn't need to give this or sell this part. From the staff perspective, it's easier to sell the whole rectangle than only part of it. And so I can, let me pull up the dimensions and I can give you the exact. So right now, the parcel 18 is 5,700 square feet. So it's just under 6,000 square feet that we're selling. Which is about 0.15 acres. It's maybe 0.13 acres or something like that. I haven't done the math exactly, but that's why we put about 0.15, because we were trying to estimate without giving an exact number, because it's more for the council and the neighbor to decide exactly how much you want to part with.
Go ahead, Len.
Remind me how long ago we actually did the purchase.
So we bought it back in 2015, is my memory. I can pull up the agreement if you'd like, but I'm pretty confident it was 2015.
Yeah.
And specifically, the request is to pay part of the survey fees, or half?
Half the survey fees and half the fence fees. The quote that the the neighbor got for the fence, the fence would be $1,440 for the 45 extra feet, and the concrete wall would be $4,525. And that's what we saw in the other section that we did participate in, was that the concrete was a little more expensive than the fence. I had, in my memo, estimated that the cost for the fencing would be $900 based on the previous bid for the fence, which was $20 a foot times 45 feet. So, and they haven't put the fence up there, so I just thought the contractor would just continue it on and give us the same price per foot. But I'm not sure why the price has gone up per foot. But I haven't had a chance to ask the resident about it either. I got this information this morning, because that's the first time they got it from the folks. So,
and for comparison, John, what's the estimated total sale price? Because sounds like that would eat up most, if anything, of the or a pretty significant chunk of what the taxpayers would sell that land for in the first place.
So I had estimated the original was going to be about $7,000. If we sold just over a tenth of an acre, it'd be $7,000. If it goes all the way up to 0.15, then it's closer to $10,000. So that's the range, is between 7 and 10, depending on, again, how much property you decide to sell and how much the neighbor's willing to buy. I mean, I think that that's the discussion that the council that we have to have. How much are we willing to sell, and then how much are they willing to buy?
Are there any other fees, recording fees that need to be paid? Do we pay them, or are you suggesting the city pay them, or that the buyer has to pay them?
So if you do a title report, we haven't talked about that, but if you do a title report, then typically there's a fee that state law requires the seller to pay for title insurance. My anticipation is that it wouldn't be required, because we have a recent enough title report from when we bought the property that should hopefully satisfy any requirements, so we could essentially just deed it over to the neighbor, and there wouldn't be any closing costs. It would be
a recording
range.
fee, because you'd have to record a new plat.
So the county doesn't charge the city to record documents, right?
That's correct.
So there wouldn't be it would be the city recording the plat, and so there wouldn't be a charge to the city to record it with the county's office.
And this, council, just also for procedural and information, is not before you tonight for a final decision. It's to have a public hearing about possibly disposing of this property, so that anyone with an opinion on the sale of this piece of property can make that known. And then also to get guidance from you, if you feel it is appropriate for the city to participate in either of those costs that have been requested, or to sell the property as well, if we'd like your feedback on that. And then we will take that information, create, based on what you say, either stop with this matter or create an agreement to bring back for the council's approval.
What's the rationale for not doing, getting an assessment of the value? Mm-hmm. In 2 years,
current
they
appraisal.
happen to be, current appraisal, 2 years. May not seem like a lot, but they kind of 2 years when the value of property's gone up quite a bit.
The reason we haven't done it is the cost. It's $300 to $500, and so there again, it's for such a small piece of property, it's just adding additional cost. But we'd be, if the council would like us to, we'd be happy to do it.
And for the benefit of our audience, while council is thinking about it, the sale of property is a city council function, responsibility. That's an important part of separation of powers in our government. The city council has to approve of the sale or disposition of any property. So that's why we have these kind of discussions, to get guidance from the council on where to go with this, and then bring it back for final approval.
Well, I don't think we'd have to have a full-blown appraisal, but I think it would be nice to have what property values are in this area right now.
So kind of like a CMA or a market analysis by a real estate agent?
Yep.
Yeah, some comparative analysis of other properties sold in the area. And then remind us, we have participated in some of that fence line, right? This would be an extension of a fence line that we have participated in. The concrete wall, we didn't participate in before, right?
We did a third of the concrete wall.
Oh, did
So
we?
the original cost for the concrete wall was $12,000 for the remainder of the subdivision up to the north across these. So across lot 7, 8, and this is now called 18, but it was used to be lot 9. So that was $12,000, and we paid $4,000 of the 12 for the rock wall, and then half of the fence cost, which was, if I remember right, $6,000 roughly. So we paid about $7,000 of the $18,000.
And not arguing you need to go either way, but part of why at least we have some pause if the city should participate in that fence is this is creating a new fence line that otherwise would not have existed without selling this property. So it was not part of what we had planned on participating in. So that is something we need your guidance on, if you feel that is something that the city should continue to participate in at a lower amount, or not participate in the sale if this property is ultimately sold.
If we were going to participate in it, John, I'd suggest if we're not going to get the same break from that contractor, that maybe we have some more bids.
Okay.
Okay, and see, we ought to have see if there's any bids that'll come in at a better price. I'll throw in a thought to you, and from what I hear you saying is, if we participate in selling this, that if we were to participate in the fence and the cost of the survey and those kind of things that we wash, we wouldn't get any money.
That's a concern I have, if this is in the
I'm,
interest of the taxpayers at the end of the day.
I was going to say, if we were going to make any money, I wouldn't vote for this unless you tied it to the stairs I've been asking for 2 years to come up that slope instead of by the Senior Citizen Center. Mm-hmm. I think that slope, there's a gate coming on there. People that walk down that slope are always senior citizens, but there are senior citizens that use that slope to come up there, and it just needs to be easier for them to get up there with the steps.
So we can get a cost estimate on those as well for the council.
I'm ready for a public hearing.
Okay, any other questions or discussion before we hold a public hearing? And this public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, is really on the sale of the property, not necessarily the kind of the terms and everything we're discussing, although you're welcome to comment on that as well, but on if the city should or should not dispose of this piece of property potentially. So the public hearing is now open on this item, and if you have any feelings on the city's possible sale of this piece of property, we'd love to hear from you at this time.
I'm Carl Harper. I live at 490 East, 2500 North. I own the property where that 18 number is, or lot 9. That piece of ground is, I've been trying to keep the weeds off of it with the contractor. They've been really high this summer. It's a buffer zone for us. We know we'll never be able to build on it. It's not a lot that is ever going to be built on. It's not wide enough. It's just there. But for us, it's something we want to take care of. We want to put lawn in, grass and sprinkler system, and I hope the association will back me on this and make it a pleasant area for the city. We don't mind going clear down to the trail and maintaining the trail. I said that in my email. We like the ground, and we want to take care of it. It would be, for us, it's going to be really nice because we put trees on the west, and we don't have to see Smith's parking lot. And we don't have to see Walgreens and the whole street down there and listen to the noise all night. So for us, it's a real benefit. And a community garden, You'd have to put a fence, because I wouldn't want to have them all trailing down the side of me on that small piece of ground. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper, would you be willing to take any questions from the city council?
Sure.
Okay, are there any from Mr. Harper while we have him here? Okay, thank you, Mr. Harper. Okay, anyone else? Mr. Looney is signaling to me. What? Do you want to say anything for the HOA, Mr. Looney?
Probably just that the HOA, I'm sorry, Leonard Looney, I live at 2527 North, 525 East. And the reason I'm standing here is that I am the president of the Legacy North HOA. From the HOA's point of view, we would rather see it put into some landscape that Mr. Harper's willing to do than a community garden, which is a great thing. I'm not trying to slight that, but considering the access to it and the proximity of it to our subdivision, our PRUD, I think it would be better served as just an open space that we as an association could use, and we have them throughout the PRUD, areas that are technically someone's property, but we all wander through. So I just think that would be the best use of the land, particularly with Mr. Harper willing to do the improvements. I think it sounds good. So from the point of view of the HOA, we're concerned about perpetuity of things along there, but I think that's a simple issue to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Looney.
Susan Clements, 668 East, 3125 North. Just kind of asking Mr. Looney, and maybe the mayor, if this is sold, will access to that piece of land be restricted to the HOA residents?
It would be private property at that point, so the private property owners, as far as the city perspective, could do as they wished with private property, subject to the easement that the city attorney described for the pipes. So it would be basically any other piece of private property at that point.
Okay.
It sounds that they have a plan for some public use of it, but from our perspective, it's private property. How they handle it is up to them.
Right, and I understand in Lakeview Heights, which is more what I'm close to, it is fairly restricted as far as their public area. It is only for the HOA people. So something to consider.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Clements. You're welcome, Mr. Looney, to address that as well.
Okay.
It was requested.
Do I
You can
need
just
to go
continue.
through that again?
Yeah.
Okay.
We know your voice when we, the lady that does the minutes, she knows your voice, so.
Yeah, I've been here a few times. From the HOA's point of view, there's, well, right now there's just an open gap in the fence, but that's intended to be a gate, not one that we will put a lock on, but just that it separates it, and that path will be there for people to use. I'm not sure how much sense it would make to anyone to shortcut through there if they don't, live in there, but it's not going to be locked up and, electric fenced and that kind of thing. So
not until there's a trail there from so many people using it, huh?
I'm not even going there, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Looney, and thank you, Mrs. Clements. We've got an answer for that one. Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing no more, council, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. That public hearing is closed then, and we go through that procedure anytime a piece of public property is considered to be sold so that we can hear from anyone who'd like to go on the record about it. So council, then we now need your guidance on what you'd like us to do as we work to prepare some resolution for this matter. And thank you, scouts, and again, our ladies and other visitors. Councilman Turner.
My suggestion is let's see a agreement. Have you drop an agreement and we'll see. You know, we aren't exactly sure on the size. We're not exactly sure on how much the fence is going to cost. We're not exactly sure on what the wall might be. I think we need to have an agreement or something drawn up saying this is what it is and this is if we opt to do with participate in the fence. You know what I mean? I think we need to kind of give us a shopping list too of what we can do there, and you know, but my personal opinion is sell the whole rectangle, not just try to piecemeal it. But that'd be my only other suggestion. So, but I'm ready. I'd like to see an agreement with those numbers a little harder.
So essentially, the appropriate thing for the council to do, if you do think you might want to consider this, not necessarily saying you have to go through with the sale, but that you'd make a motion tonight to declare the property as surplus, which then allows the city to put together an agreement that would affect the sale that you would then approve before it happened, if that makes sense. So the state law requires that you hold the hearing, you decide if it's surplus property or not, and if it is surplus, then you come back and make a decision on whether to actually dispose of it after declaring it surplus. Does that make sense?
Okay, then I'd make a motion to declare the real property at 525 East, 2550 North at approximately 0.15 acres as surplus real property.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Not yet, apparently.
No second yet. I really think we need to get an appraisal, and I think we need to get the elements of an agreement. We don't need an agreement. That's probably inappropriate at this time, but the details of what an agreement would amount to if we were to sell the whole thing, or if the desire is for something less than that, and I'd like to look at what complications that presents to the city if we don't sell the whole thing. And if we do keep the whole thing, I mean, we have it. It belongs to the city. If people do want a garden, it would be a shame to spend everything we'd get for selling it to just get it sold. If we could put it to use. So I'd like to get some more feedback. I think, as Tiffany said, she would rather not have to maintain it if it was something besides a garden.
Yes.
But if it was a garden, how would that work?
Because it was intended originally for a detention basin, which are not sprinkled, they're not sodded, they're mowed, but they're not lawn grass necessarily. They're pasture grass at best case, and not necessarily, watered all summer. So that was the original intention for the parcel. As John said, the detention basin, just because of the design of the parking lot, got moved. So now we had this extra space. There's not any desire from the Parks Department to maintain these kind of smaller parks because they take a lot of work for a very limited number of people who can benefit from it. And so her assessment was that the best solution was using it for a community garden. That's option one. At the same time, I wanted to reach out to the neighbors and see if they had interest. And that's how this whole discussion was spawned as well. So, yes, we do not recommend doing anything in terms of a small park there because it's such a limited area. It's adjacent to a private neighborhood and a public facility, so we don't anticipate there would be a large number of people using it for the cost of maintaining the sprinklers, fertilizing, grassing, etc. So if you'd like us to move forward working on these things you've asked for, that we can definitely do that. Councilman Uri?
Well, I agree with Lynn. I think we need to look at some of those other things. There are some other things that I think we ought to consider too. We think it's a small place that maybe no one might want to use, but we ought to. I think we ought to get an opinion from the senior citizens. There may be and I know at one time they talked about on the east before we took all those trees out about having a place where they could go sit with picnic tables and enjoy a lunch outside in the better weather. So it may lend it to that kind of thing. And as far as taking care of it, there could be an agreement made with the people that take care of mow the lawns for the HOA. That maybe they'd say we'll mow it when we mow those.
Okay. Mr. Looney left before we could talk to him about that, but. Okay, so we'll have the visits about that as well. So, John, why don't you read the list of things we're going to study for council's instructions here? I know. Can you just tell us what we've gotten so far to do?
So I've got a cost on the stairs. The idea of taking this money and putting it towards the ramp and stairs to get up to the senior center parking lot from the Smiths Trail. An appraisal or a CMA, just kind of a simple analysis of the value of the land. And the other one, I stopped mid-thought. I wrote get details, so get some details.
Fencing and
costs, yeah.
Retaining wall.
And then get some information about sharing the maintenance costs with the HOA, where we'd pay their landscaper so much a month to just mow it at the same time.
And perhaps make it into a little picnic area for the senior citizens.
Okay.
And I think we, where we already own this, and it could be an asset to the city if we knew people would use it, we need to reach out to those, assuming that they really didn't get the message that might go not the city wouldn't get the advantage of having this if we were to sell it, and that the possibility is that we could expand the garden we have over here, or maybe the Senior Citizens Center might have some kind of a use. I think we at least reach out in those two directions, and maybe it will be in our best interest to just get rid of it. We want it to look nice, so we need to. That needs to be paramount. But it's still it's owned by the city residents, and we ought to make sure that we've exhausted finding those people that might utilize it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion on this item or guidance? So we got a pretty good plan. It sounds like all options are still on the table, and we'll research in several areas. Thank you, Harpers. Thank you, HOA. We'll be in more contact. This is how the process goes. We bring a proposal, City Council takes a look at it, and then we bring it back, and one of these times we'll have something that works and goes forward. Anything further on that item? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 5, which is a discussion and/or action on potential asphalt trails on 1700 North and 2100 North in conjunction with Green Acres Elementary School. John's pulling up a document I sent to you several months ago, Council. We've discussed previously about some projects we've proposed doing. We met with the Green Acres PTA and Community Council at the end of last school year, so this spring, and discussed some concerns that they had, and we identified 5 possible projects that could be done in that area. One, and I'll orient everyone to the map here, this is 2100 North. The map is oriented north at the top of the page here. This is 1700 North. Here's Washington Boulevard, and then here's Fruitland Drive. So we kind of got a box there, 1700, Fruitland, 2100, and Washington, so everyone knows the area that we're talking about. The 5 projects that we discussed to possibly improve safety in the area for children walking to school, to Green Acres Elementary School, which is right about in the middle of the box that I drew there. here at about 1800 North and 700 East, or the future Monroe Boulevard. The 5 projects, just to briefly summarize, were the Gold Star here on 1700 North and 700 East is a proposed flashing pedestrian activated light that would provide a place where the children could push the button and get a flashing signal to be able to cross the street. And the council has already approved that project previously. We're sharing the cost 50-50 with the school volunteers, I'll say, be it PTA, community council, the school effort themselves. So the parents and teachers are going to pay for half of that flashing light, and then the city's paying the other half. So that project's already in the works. It will be installed for certain before school begins this fall. A second project that we discussed was possibly a trail connection between a new neighborhood that's just south here of 2100 North, a little bit west of Fruitland Drive, that doesn't connect through to another relatively new neighborhood here on 2100 North. So the kids here are walking back up to 2100 North and then coming down to get to school. It'd be nice if maybe there was a trail to connect those two neighborhoods so the kids wouldn't have to go back up to 2100 North. That is a narrow road. It doesn't have the curb, gutter, and sidewalk that we traditionally see. It has the canal and everything. The discussions on that are ongoing. There's no requests before you tonight on that, council members. But the other 2 projects, we're also working on a way to maybe improve the maintenance of a trail that connects to the school in the winter for plowing. And then the last 2 items were, there's a small piece on 1700 North at about 700 East that does not have a sidewalk. It's the only piece of 1700 North that doesn't have a sidewalk on at least one side or the other. And so the request was, could we install a sidewalk at that little piece? It's basically only a couple of yards, or a trail in that area, to be able to have at least a sidewalk or a trail on the north or south side of 1700 North, and a safe place for the kids to walk on either side of the street there. Same request on 2100 North. There's a larger stretch, this green piece here, north and east of the school, that does not have a sidewalk between those 2 roads there, and the same request was made to be able to consider possibly a trail or a sidewalk there. So that was the discussion we had with Green Acres. We have some cost estimates that I've sent you previously. We'll pull up now to show you what those 2 asphalt trail projects would cost. That's what we're proposing be considered here. As a sidewalk would be significantly more expensive. Yes, that is the document there. So here is a cost estimate, council members, for these 2 projects.
Make that larger.
Yes, here we go, and let's zoom in a little more even on this, just that key area down there. Okay. So the 2 projects, the 2100 North project is about double the size of the 1700 North project, and it's a little less complicated as far as the grades that are there. And so it's not only, it is larger, but it's a lower cost per square foot in the estimate, coming in at about $7,000 total. The 1700 North piece is much smaller, but a significantly higher cost per square foot because of the site conditions and additional site work that would need to be done, and that comes in at about $4,400, so roughly $11,500 total. In keeping with what we had done previously with Majestic Elementary to do a trail on 2550, we had asked them to share in the cost, and so I made the same request to Principal Lisa Gilstrap from Green Acres Elementary, which I'd like to invite her to please come forward and share with the City Council members your feedback on this project, the importance of it, and also the willingness of the, not the school as the government, but the parents and teachers, the school community, to help us get the funds for the project.
Right. Well, we have put together a separate parent committee, kind of the ones who have been most concerned about safety, and they're very, very excited to have a potential resolution. This has been on our safety plan as a concern for, I've been at the school for 6 or 7 years, and it's been on there since before I came, and to actually have an actionable plan is very exciting, and they've been very excited. So we have this committee, and they've put together, they've been working with the PTA. The PTA has planned a carnival to cover the costs, get businesses and stuff like that. And then the other part of the parent committee has committed to getting donations to cover it. On our prior project, I got $2,000 from the district, because I know that was part of our conversation last time. So I can go to the district to get money out of this year's budget. That came out of last year's budget, so there'll be a new fund. So we're committed to covering our cost of that, and we're so grateful to have something actionable in place. The roads are getting more and more busy, and we're trying to encourage kids to walk and be more active, and I just want them to get to and from school safely. Plus, we have a lot of people in the community that ride their bikes and walk, and it's a benefit to the community to have a complete trail. So we're committed to paying our cover of the costs. We're very, very hopeful we can get this done prior to school starting. If not, we'll be thrilled to have it anytime, because it's been a concern for a long time.
And actually, the principal is even ahead of us. They're already starting efforts to raise funds. This is an advertisement that was in the Lindy Best Realty magazine that I just saw because my wife was reading the magazine and she showed me it. So can you tell us about what's kind of in the works to help raise some funds this fall?
That's the PTA. They want to do this carnival for the community, and any proceeds that come will go towards our safety projects to keep the kids safe. That's their main concern, and they're big on. Our PTA is really big on health, keeping the kids active. They do fit clubs and things like that, and then also, keeping them safe. It's a big part of the PTA's thing. So we have a PTA, we have the community council, and then we have an additional parent group who has been working over the summer to mobilize and get the fundraising started. So.
Councilman Uri.
Yeah, I think I came up with, when we did Majestic, and I have the same request this time, how many students are we talking about that would use either one or both parts of those trails? Now, along with that, has the homeowner on that south side of 1700 been contacted yet? Yes.
We talked to all the Public Works did to discuss with them this project.
Okay, when, and I know it's a ways down the road, but incrementally we could put in portions of Monroe. And that portion right there, if the Monroe came across, would have curb and gutter, which would facilitate him bringing sidewalk across there. And I'm thinking we ought to have that discussion.
And that is another reason why we're recommending a trail now, because yes, you're exactly right. When Monroe goes into that piece, curb and gutter and sidewalk will be installed probably for that whole portion.
Well, I guess what maybe I'm not making myself clear, but I'm saying, okay, sidewalk there instead of a asphalt path, and do a three-way. If the homeowner, at one point, he's going to put sidewalk in there, so we make it's going to cost him less if he splits it between three people, him, us, and the PTA, to put a nice sidewalk there instead of asphalt.
I don't believe we've had that kind of a discussion, but we can ask if they would be interested. This is a property we attempted to purchase as part of the Monroe corridor, but it was unsuccessful. So
send this principal over. She's prettier than you are. She
may make some progress where we didn't.
Members. We'll send them down.
So we can definitely ask that, Councilman, and try and make something work with the homeowner there.
And how about the property owners on 2100? Have we made any approaches there to Brent Call and and other people down along that.
We have discussed putting in the trail with them again, so they knew kind of the plan, see if there were any concerns. There's not the same incentive for them to build a sidewalk because it would only ever be required if we were requiring everyone on 2100 to do
sidewalk
it.
part, but in my discussion with John earlier today, if we put that in a special improvement district, we could put sidewalk in there.
Yes, as with any of the areas with no sidewalk.
So, there's some other options that are on the table, and I don't like to sound hard-hearted because I'm not hard-hearted, but one of the reasons I ask how many children are we talking about that are using that is, I've lived in my home on Mountain Road for 40 years. I can count without even, just off the top of my head, probably 60 kids that lived in Mountain Road and around that area that walked 1700 all the time to school. If they didn't walk to school on 1700, my wife and other women carpooled them down there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We got a little section there that's not that much money, but still.
That's part of why this has become a more urgent concern, is because not last year, but the spring before that, the transportation department, and it's all funded through state and all of these things that go on. And so they did an audit of our busing, and they started measuring from the back gate, and that took a bunch of these houses off of being eligible for busing. And so then they got on their bikes and they've been walking, and so it's increased the amount of students who have to get to school or be carpooled. But a lot of them can walk, and a lot of parents walk with them or ride their bikes with them, and that's a good thing too. But it's just getting so busy, and we have more kids that are walking because of the buses have been taken away up a little higher. So it's just become more of a concern. I had several calls last year of parents witnessing near misses, because kids don't always pay attention, and drivers don't always.
Kids don't walk on the sidewalks when there are sidewalks.
And they don't always walk straight.
They walk in the street anyway.
That is a true thing. And we are doing our part. We did a lot of things with educating the kids on how to find the safe path to school, to walk in groups, so we're doing that. We had a bike rodeo. We've been doing those kinds of things to try and, make that our norm. Safe walking and safe biking our norm, so we're trying to do it on that element, but if we could get a complete path, that just would eliminate a little bit of that
Councilman
concern.
Turner?
So back to the dollars, you said about 11,500, so $12,000 for these math. So are we looking at participating half? Or is that 11,000 or 12,000? Is that our portion or what?
My recommendation is that we do very similar to what we did with Majestic Elementary, which was we asked them to raise $3,000 of the path on 2550, and ask the same from Green Acres Elementary. The council in 2014 approved that we would build the trail for Majestic. It was a similar situation in the summer so that it could be available for kids to use in the fall, even though their contributions weren't collected until that fall. And it worked. Majestic exceeded that number. I mean, it worked out, and I'm sure Green Acres will do their very best to try and hit that goal as well. So that would be my recommendation, that the city council fund it now with a request in the motion, as we did with Majestic, that the school raise a portion as well, school community, and then we'll let them, work on it once they're back in school this fall, but we'll put the trail in this summer so that we know for sure it's there for the kids this fall.
So that's the total cost of both of them. That's not
$11,500 is the total cost.
So we'd have half of that.
We'd have
8,000.
8,500 of it if the school was able to raise the 3,000.
So, Carl, you're in the construction. What's your guesstimate on putting sidewalk in instead?
Double that.
Double.
Another thing is my office aide, her husband works at a rock pit, and she didn't know. She spoke with him about perhaps getting some of the materials donated, and I didn't know if perhaps the person you got the bid from was already kind of doing anything like that, or if they would be open to that. So it's a possibility we could
It's
get.
definitely possible. Anytime we do a bid, generally, if there's something that could be done, self-performed, or things, that's something we can negotiate with the contractor.
So maybe that would lower the entire
That
cost.
could be an in-kind donation that would be towards the amount the school's
Perfect.
raising,
Perfect.
if that were able to be done. Councilman Satterthwaite.
So we've set a precedent. I'm in support of doing what's been proposed. That is that we fund it and ask the school to participate to the tune of $3,000 or so. But the fact that the reality that we might waste some of that does justify us asking the question about the property owner maybe participating in making it sidewalks so we don't waste that.
We will do that first.
We should
Council,
do that
or
first,
could
and
do
then
that and bring it back to you if that's your preference. You could tell us either way, and we will make a full effort on that to see if that's something the property owner is interested in. It's rented right now.
Cheryl had something.
Oh, it's not. He lives there. Okay. Councilwoman Stoker.
I'm in full support of this also. That trail that we put in for Majestic, I mean, it is used all the time. And it's made a huge difference. Those kids are on the trail. They're not out on the road. It's a lot safer. And I honestly do not see how we can not do this also. So I think it's the great idea. And it sounds like you have a great committee already that's willing to go above and beyond. So
They're really, really thrilled to have a workable solution. We just were wringing our hands before, and now we have a plan.
I think it'll work out very well. I think we'll be surprised at what you can raise.
Thank you.
So are we talking tonight about, I mean, we still got a lot of questions about 2100.
Well, this is really up to the city council to decide if you're comfortable to approve the project, comfortable to tell us to try with the landowner and come back in a week or two. That's your discretion. So if you'd like to approve the project and instruct us to make that effort first and report to you,
No, I mean,
do that.
I'm talking about on 2100, have we made all contacts with all property owners? Are they willing to donate the land like Mr. Opikins did?
All of them will be in the public right-of-way, so technically,
Courtesy to.
It was a courtesy call to kind of let them know, see if they had any questions or concerns, how can we match it into their driveways. So yes, everyone has been personally visited by the Public Works Department about the project, but both of the proposed trails would be in the existing public right-of-way, so there's not any ownership or gifting of property that would need to happen for these, which is another reason we like the trail too, because it's not necessarily where a sidewalk ultimately might end up that could require some legal work. I'm not certain that it would, but I know the trails where they're located don't require any property exchange.
Another thing, council, with the sidewalk even on 1700 is that typically the sidewalk ends up raised behind a curb. And so it would be really hard to put the sidewalk in the right spot without adding the curb as well. A trail is a simpler, cheaper option for kind of a temporary fix, or, because as soon as the sidewalk is usually, 6 inches above the road grade, and essentially we'd put the sidewalk in and then most likely have to come back and redo it and raise it back up. I don't have, we could look at the elevations, but a trail is easier.
So is it the recommendation that we not consider going after the sidewalk because we can't establish the grade?
Unless we were going to do curb and gutter too. I think, especially on 1700 North, you could go and basically to where it's going to wrap into Monroe and put that in. But I think it'd be hard to do the sidewalk without doing the curb.
Yeah. Okay. While we're talking about this, there's another safety issue on 1700 North. I'm surprised that this room isn't full of parents, and that's a city-owned ditch that runs full of water. And we've been dragging our feet because we had some years ago, we had a homeowner on 1700 North that made a proposal to the city that he would pay for the pipe if we would put the pipe in. He's since had a plat, gotten a plat of his property, and that offer's off the table now because on his plat, the city actually owns into his property where the canal, past the canal. So it's our property. We need to make the ditch safe and not him. And so if we're talking about being safe, let's be safe and let's start looking at that project.
They are pretty deep along there.
That is a important project, an expensive project, but I agree. It's one that needs to be started to put on some plans.
That thing is eating away at our road. When the water comes down there, which forces the kids, because there's no sidewalk there on either side, so it forces our kids to walk further and further out into the road as they come by there. So need to look at that.
Comments on that, parents? I have a couple of my parents here tonight. Anna, do you live by the ditch?
I don't live there. I know though, I do walk around there, and I know the road is wider. That there's a little bit more of a shoulder, so that can act as a pathway a little bit more than the area where we're talking about where it's so narrow. There's nowhere to go but in the road.
Yeah, we're pleased with any movement forward.
Well, I'm just concerned that we come in here and we can tug at the heartstrings and say our kids aren't safe. But if we're going to tug at the heartstrings and say our kids aren't safe, then they're not safe by fast-flowing water in a ditch either.
This is true.
And so I think that needs to be addressed also. And it's not your job to address that. That's the city's job to address that.
Oh, thanks. I got a lot of jobs.
But let's do first things first.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's sounding like it might not be feasible if we got to put curb and gutter in as well. But I think that out of consideration.
Look and report to you.
Yeah, but I think we need to move quickly. You know, the school start is coming soon, so I hope we can do this like next week.
We still could complete this likely, especially if it's approved tonight.
And the request for proposal had all the engineering done, so these guys, if we were to go, say thumbs up, it's going to happen.
Yes.
It's going to happen then.
Correct.
So you really think it could be done right away? People are pretty busy, aren't they, with asphalt stuff?
Yes. As a matter of fact, through confusion between myself and the Public Works Department, they had already scheduled this. And I told them, stop, because the council has not approved it. And so, yes, the firm is planning on it. If, not that I'm pressuring you, you need to do that. But the firm can complete the work before the school because the Public Works Department thought it had been approved. They were operating on that assumption and have already planned for it to be done, but I told them, no, we need to not do that. Nothing's been done, no money's expended, but it can definitely be done if that is the route you go.
Better ask the Public Works Department to read the minutes.
So, yeah. It was a little awkward in staff meeting when he said, and we're ready to do that trail. I said, that trail's not approved yet. We had to postpone the meeting. Principal was out of town. So, yes, the work could be done if you do approve it.
So what do you need, a motion to approve this based on the dollar amount?
That is what we would love to hear, but up to you. I mean, if you would like it to be studied more or brought back, it can be. It's your discretion.
Well, it's a judgment call as to whether if it's feasible. I mean, we got 2 or 3 factors there that tend towards it's not feasible, where landowners got to participate. There's additional cost of sidewalk and curb. And I guess if I could feel comfortable that really isn't feasible, I'd move this ahead and approve it tonight.
John, do you have any comments on that?
I don't know if this is easy to see, but you can see this area right here. That dirt is dropping, and so my impression would be that you're going to have to raise 8 to 10 inches of fill to put concrete in, which bumps the cost even more. And there again, I don't think you can do it without putting the curb in. If you're putting that much fill, then the water will just back up against it, and you got to put the curb in to protect it. So I think an asphalt trail makes a whole lot more sense, because we can slope it down, hit the asphalt, and then it'll slough off into the city-owned property and just go into the ground, as opposed to risk damaging the sidewalk that we installed. Because if we installed sidewalk low, it would work, but then you lose the benefit of installing the sidewalk now.
So I make a motion that we approve the asphalt trail in 1700 North and 2100 North with the participation by Mrs. Gilstrap and the PTA folks to the tune of $3,000. And yeah, do we need some?
Let me ask you something, Mayor. Was Majestic? It was just $3,000, or wasn't a third that they had to pay a third of it?
No, the motion was $3,000 specifically.
But they were, I remember working with that.
Approximate. I mean, it was a goal. It was not.
The goal was to come up with a third of it.
Yeah.
We've set our goal at 3,800, which is a third of the 11,000, and then we've already done half on the
So they're
sprinkling lights.
already exceeding expectations, council members.
We're just grateful. That's all.
So we have a motion.
Second.
And a second to approve the construction of this project now with a goal of at least $3,000 to the school community to participate in. And I'm assuming that is okay to be raised in the future as we've discussed.
Yeah, that could be part of the motion. The city pays for this up front, and that we give you the time to get your people together. I was really impressed with the things that little PTA president out there did, and I know you've got the potential to do the same.
I'm impressed that you're going after the school board to get some money, because they're the ones that are building the schools where they're unsafe.
We got a piece of them too. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have a motion and a second then to approve the asphalt trails on 1700 North and 2100 North. Is there any further discussion? We'll start the voting with Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite.
Yes.
Councilman Uri.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And that passes, and we appreciate the good discussion. This is,
no, and then I
oh, and
couldn't vote
applause
no,
for this
they
one too.
made it.
This is how our discussion goes.
That's why I didn't.
For anyone who's here for our first meeting tonight, I assure you our city council is this thorough on any item that comes before them, which I think is a good thing, because the government's not run just by the mayor or city administrator. We have the city council that carefully looks at every proposal. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, discussion and/or action to consider a deer management program. This has been an item of a lot of discussion in the community. We've got a lot of feedback. John Call will be presenting on this, kind of a little history of this item, what we have found out from DWR. Also, I'll say at the beginning, Councilman Phil Swanson, who's out of town, has made a request to the city council to table any final action on this item to a future meeting. And council, you can consider that as we go through the discussion. So with that, John, why don't you start us out?
So, council, I provided you with the staff report, and let me just tell you, there is a little bit of confusion between me and the DWR. I'm trying to get an exact amount on how much the relocation cost is. Essentially, there's the 3 options. One is to relocate the animals. One is to take the animals lethally. One is to not do anything. And I looked back at the previous minutes from when they were here, when Channing Howard was here, and the minutes say $200 per animal. I thought I had remembered $800 an animal, but it sounds like council members remember $200 as well.
Or maybe a little more, but it was 200. It was not
minimum of $200.
It was not $800.
It was around the $200.
So, anyways, in my mind, I had thought it was higher, but some of the cities who've done the non-lethal were actually part of a pilot program like Bountiful. So they did 2 years of the non-lethal, where the DWR actually just took them for free and then the last 2 years they did it, they paid for it, and I think that went up through 2016-17 season. Since my staff report was written, I got some.
John, can I say one thing? There is, if we pursue any program with the DWR, there is the added cost, regardless if it's lethal or non-lethal, that we have to have a study done and establish the size of the herd, establish the problems from the herd with, I'm assuming, some research on accident data, on damage that's occurring to crops. We don't know what the cost of that is, but there is some first step with the DWR would be doing the, I can't remember the exact name of the study, but there's basically a deer impact study to justify the need for whatever, program we're pursuing. Councilman Turner?
Who does that study, and do we know a cost on that? And is that a cost we'd have to pay for?
It is something the city would have to pay for. We don't have more details just yet, though. We're trying to get some more details from the DWR.
Yeah, and so since we had one of you had requested additional information from the city on statistics for animal accidents, including deer. And I've got the best information that the police station has. We have good information on deer accidents, deer-involved collisions, at least those that have been reported. We don't have very good information on other animals, whether they be domestic or other wild animals that are small. But I can give you the information we have, and that is in this sheet that you haven't seen yet because I got it about an hour ago, or I guess 3 hours ago. And essentially, this is a list of all of the accidents or injured animals that were found in the city for the past 3 years since 2014. So it's about 3.5 years of data because 2017 is included. There are a few trends in this data, and I hope I'm trying to give you the trends I see, so there might be something else out there. The majority of the incidents, in particular where it was a confirmed deer versus vehicle accident, the majority of them happened on Washington Boulevard. At all lengths from the bottom of the city all the way up through 2800 North. So there's nothing, we don't have reports anything north of essentially Alberta, where Alberta and Washington connect. That doesn't mean the animals aren't up there. It just means that we don't have a report of an actual incident. So there were 16 of the 31 incidents that we've reported were on Washington Boulevard. There were 10 more that occurred on what I would call minor major roads, which would be Alberta, Fruitland, and Mountain Road. And then there were 5 that occurred on more of our residential streets. And so, you can look at that data however you like. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that all of the incidents occurred between essentially September and March. There's 2 outliers. There was one that occurred on August 31st in 2014 and one that occurred on April 10th in 2016. So all of the incidents that the police have data on for deer have occurred in the winter months, or what I would call the winter months. And then the only information we have on small animals is essentially our animal service or a police officer picking up a animal that didn't make it off the road. And for 2016, for the first half of the year, we had 16 of those, and the second half, 14. And then so far this year, or through June this year, we've had 24. So we're trending about 30 a year, but those are the ones that are reported that we see that someone else doesn't take care of. So there's probably a little bit more of that. The officers I talked to, which is Officer Crowther, or Detective Crowther, and Lieutenant Quinney, indicated that in their career with North Ogden, they remember each of them maybe twice where a small animal was the cause of an accident, meaning someone hit their brakes and they got rear-ended or they swerved off the road and caused damage, but they don't have a way to really track that in the system. But it's not something that's happened or is happening frequently enough in the recent history that it made them remember a specific instance. They just said maybe twice in my career. And Lieutenant Crowther's been with the police station for 30 plus years. And Officer Quinney has been here for 15 plus or 20 plus. So that's the information that PD's given us. As far as the cost of the lethal plan, the city actually gets to recoup some of that cost. We can charge up to $50 for a tag. Highland has been in the news a little lately because they do a lethal program for deer control, but you have to be certified by a special teacher about how to use a bow in order to get a license. The city issues them a license, and they have some certain safety protocols in place, like the arrows all have to have the name and number of the hunter on it. And then there's some other things that if we do a lethal program that the DWR requires, which is you have to have a place for the meat to go, can't be wasted. All the bits and pieces have to leave the site and be disposed of properly. And all the horns and anything like that have to be turned into the DWR for tracking. So it's not necessarily a prize hunt or anything like that. And it's specifically to handle what some might call a deer nuisance problem in the urban areas. And so those are the details I have. There might be more in my memo or in my head. If you have questions, I can answer anything you have. Or look into it deeper, especially where Councilman Swanson has asked that maybe we don't make a firm decision until he's back, so I can bring back more information if you have questions.
Council, do you have questions for John? Councilman Turner.
I don't know if this is a question for John, but or maybe we just need to study this out. This is the first year that I remember. I know last year early on we had some residents complain, and then we talked about it, and then this year it seems like it's a little more. Maybe it warrants a study, but I don't want to just spend the money to do a study if it's like tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe it warrants a study. If the DWR requires us to do a study to either kill or transport them, we're going to spend that money if that's the decision we made anyway. So maybe it warrants a study at minimum to see what it is impacting.
That is the first step for either DWR program, would be doing the study, which we could find a little more details about a cost and bring that back to you in the next week or two, if that's what you'd like to.
I don't know, maybe even if it's a university type thing where they just come out and count the critters and stuff.
I'm sure it's involved. They're going to have some kind of biologist or something, I'm assuming, out here to count deer in certain times of day in certain areas. I'm sure they'd want to talk to residents that are seeing herds regularly in the same place, gather information from them to try and get an idea. One of the primary goals of the study is to establish the size of the urban herd that lives year-round within the city boundaries, which is essentially the purpose of this program. Would be those urban deer, not necessarily some that might be forced down the mountain periodically during winter. It would really be to determine the size of the year-round urban herd.
And that's if they have to be here year-round. Does that sound like the study is going to take a long time?
Well, not right now, I would assume, because any that are here are not because of snow. So, it would seem that the current time is a time, just not being an expert, I'm just kind of drawing some conclusions, but that this would be the time of year that they could determine the size of the urban herd, because there's no snow or other conditions that would be forcing them down into the city. Councilman Turner.
Just one other, I had my son and I, we were having this talking about this, and I don't know if there's any way to report this or check this too, is with the deer coming down and the deer living here, has there been other cities that have had other problems with other critters because of the deer, such as coyotes or even mountain lions? That like Bountiful, did they have a problem because the deer are coming down, and that's maybe
there was a mountain lion shot today in Salt Lake City. It was on KSL. I don't know if it was coming after deer or not. We had a mountain lian.
Percy, Utah fan that shot a cougar.
We had a mountain lion shot on the east bench in the city last winter.
He was just actually right outside the city, wasn't he? Just up on the hillside, yeah. So
It had come into a neighbor or a residence, a yard though, when it was killed.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Councilman Uri?
Well, I know there's lots of coyotes right up above my house because I hear them every morning. And my neighbor has had a fox in his yard that has been stealing his chickens. So,
saw that fox.
So it's a problem. But I guess if we, to make it safe for our children in the streets, we bought $4,000 flashing signs. Maybe we ought to buy some $4,000 flashing signs and teach those deer where to cross the roads. If that fails, maybe we could hire some crossing guards to help them get across the road.
We did ask this question on a public poll on Facebook. John can kind of just show you this. We do not claim this is a scientific poll or necessarily representative of the citizens of North Ogden, but I think it provided some great information, nearly 250 comments as well, with some very great points made on both sides, some very passionate feelings on both sides, as this is an issue many people, feel their deers are causing problems, and many people feel they should be left alone. So there were some great points made on both sides. John, can you maybe just summarize this? And I know most, if not all of you, have already read these comments and gone through this.
So essentially the three options are here again on the board, which is do nothing, do a lethal program, or relocate them. The one that got the biggest response was do nothing, which was 526 votes. The next one down was the allow them to be hunted, which was 154. And then there was one person who said relocate. So the majority of the people, at least who wanted to be involved in this thing on Facebook, said, leave them where they are or take them lethally. So that seems to be the most likely option that the public would recommend. If we are doing a program, it seems like they would probably recommend a lethal program as opposed to relocating them. But it might change if you flipped it. Some of the people who said do nothing, who just say let the animals be, might flop to the hey, let's do the non-lethal program. Let's spend some money, because they might be saying let's not hurt Bambi or where Bambi wants to go, if that makes sense. So as you whittle down your options, it might be worth some more input if the council is looking at doing a program of letting residents pick between those two. But right now, most people are saying it's not a problem, we shouldn't worry about it, at least the people who respond here.
By 5 to 1.
And most of the residents don't experience damage but there again, that doesn't discount. There are individuals in this community whose crops have been decimated by the deer. So it's not there to make light of what they're going through at all either. So, or I'm not trying to discount what they're experiencing.
Yeah, we are trying to present you information and don't have necessarily, certainly not yet, a recommendation one way or the other. There's been some great points, as we've said, on both sides, and kind of would like to see your feelings and where to go from here. I would hazard that I am very hesitant to undertake a relocation program because the cost. So, I don't have a problem. If we were doing a program, I personally would think we would look strongly at a lethal program because of the costs associated with relocating. Even if there's a few hundred deer in the city, that's still, even if it's only $200, that's $40,000 for relocation, which that's a significant chunk out of our budget that could be used for a lot of things that have more benefits to the residents. So I would say I'm not in favor of a relocation program that has high costs. Councilman Turner.
I just Phil is, as you know, he's out of the country, and he commented earlier in a text that he'd like to discuss this. So I think we
table it for that.
I think we need to take have it brought back to us, but maybe you could have little more information, maybe how much the study costs.
Well, we can definitely research the study, because maybe it is worth just doing the study to see the size and scope of the problem. That may help us, determine what, if any, is the appropriate response after that has been done. So we will definitely research the cost of the study with DWR to have that nailed down for a future discussion. Councilwoman Stoker and then Councilman Satterthwaite.
I think, and also in this, the consideration has to be taken into fact that these deer are not leaving when the summer comes. They're born here, they stay here. They don't have any fear of any predators because they've not had to survive. And so, yes, maybe the deer population isn't that astronomical right now, but it's going to be, especially if the conditions are just right. They're fed, they're watered, they're healthy. So then that means they have more babies. And so the herd grows. So yes, maybe the problem isn't out of control yet, but it's going to be. So it's like, are we going to be proactive or just do nothing and then wish we would have? That's my thought. So to be taken into consideration.
Councilman Satterthwaite.
So in addition to the study, I would like to have us contact cities that have done a lethal program and find out if hopefully it's played out long enough that they know whether they were able to eradicate or reduce them enough that they thought it was worth it.
I will ask one of the Highland City Councilmen is a good friend, and I'll ask for a report from him, and maybe he might join us by phone or something in a future meeting to give a perspective, because they do have a lethal program in Highland that has been reported in the media as extremely successful. So we'll work on that, as well as Bountiful and some of the other cities we've seen who've implemented one program or the other, to get some feedback for you. Other discussion on this item? Or
thank you. I think that's
motion to table.
Motion to table.
Yep.
Is there a second?
Second. He made the motion.
We have a motion and a second to table this item with some specific items from the council to research further, and we anticipate we'll bring those back within hopefully the first half of this month, but we kind of need to see what DWR says from us. Is there any further discussion on that motion to table this item? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Then that item is tabled, and we will begin working immediately on the items that have been requested for further discussion by the council. And at the end of this meeting, sir, there'll be another comment period. That there was one at the beginning of the meeting. We could have heard from you at that time. So
It's concerning this item.
Thanks. That's why I invited at the beginning of the meeting anyone to comment on any item for the whole agenda. Item 7 is a discussion on impact fees for residential units in North Ogden City. This has been an item that has been requested to be discussed by several of our council members, and our city administrator has put together a presentation on this item, and we'll turn the time over to you for this.
So, Council, I'm kind of anticipating this to be more me trying to answer questions than it is me trying to present information. And a lot of it is, some of this will be based on my impression of the impact fee world. I do know that impact fees are confusing, problematic, and cause all sorts of questions and issues with residents, developers, and cities themselves. And it's not likely to ever get any less confusing, because every city is different and every city has to look at it, their own way. There are some things that I think are in state code that I think relate to this, and it's tied to this section 1136-401 or 403-1B, and basically it says a city may waive fees for, and then it gives a very specific list of groups, which includes government entities, charter schools, and things like that. But then it specifically says, but only if they identify another source of money other than impact fees to pay for that. And so the way I read that as an attorney is the only group that gets an exception are those allowed in the ordinance, and even those groups, the city has to come up with a way to find the money to pay for it. So last week when we talked and I said that there's no way to waive fees without finding another source, it's based on this code. But there might be attorneys out there who would say you can't waive it for anybody except for the people who fall in that group. And so that's my impression of the code. I know that, like I said, there's lots of other questions and things that are coming up. The main function of impact fees is to pay for the improvements on the lot, not necessarily to pay for the improvements by a family. Does that make sense? And so the hard thing that we deal with is that as impact fees are paid and as houses are built and impact fees are used to cover the expense of adding those houses to the system, typically those impact fees are not for the neighborhood improvements. They're for what we call system improvements, which is the larger lines. So in a standard subdivision, they run an 8-inch water line because that's the minimum standard to run fire flow through a fire hydrant. What impact fees are paying for is for the 10, 12, and 14-inch lines that we have in the city, as well as the pumps and the wells that pull the water out of the ground and treat it. And so just using water as an example, all the neighborhood improvements, so all the stuff that, like I live over, by Oak Lawn, all the water lines that are in that subdivision, my impact fees aren't going to pay for that. It's the developer's installation costs to pay for those improvements. Impact fees for me go towards building or paying the city back for the wells that we've dug, or for the pump stations we've installed, or for the water rights we've purchased. And so it doesn't mean that the council can't reduce fees. Not saying I'd recommend that or I wouldn't, but it's basically would need to be a reduction to every property in the city, not without respect to who owns it. Does that make sense? And so that's my impression. That's my legal recommendation, at least as a starting point. But I think that this is a healthy discussion. Impact fees are, like I said, they're complicated and sometimes problematic. There's been some cities who have suffered greatly at the expense of impact fees. In Utah County, they've been beat up a lot down there over impact fees, and we haven't seen any cases up in Weber County.
Davis County.
So yeah, there's been some in Davis and some in Salt Lake, but Utah County's actually been the place where the Home Builders Association is very active down there in making sure that fees are reasonable and being spent the way they're supposed to be spent. So.
Well, I'm told that the reason there's no more East Layton City is because of their impact fees got out of hand and they got sued, and in order to save the city, they had to join in Layton City and become Layton City.
Don't we? I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Don't we know that is it Provo City down in Utah Valley where they had problems? It was because they actually ended up charging more than the studies would justify.
It was Lehigh.
Okay, and the background there, as I understand it, is that a very careful study is done to evaluate what the infrastructure costs are to support a home, and they do it in a way that we use engineering teams that deal with cities and with sewer and storm drain and water and those kinds of things that we provide for city residents. And my sense is that when they do that kind of a study, we have some confidence that the amount that we're charging is justified, that it does actually help us keep that infrastructure in place to serve the homes that are going to be on the line. To the question that was raised, or the statement raised earlier about, if a lot is just sitting there and there's already the pipes in the road, and so why do we need to charge for it? I think if you follow this line of reasoning, we actually kind of loan, because we go ahead and make the investment in the infrastructure, but not all properties that could take advantage of that have paid impact fees until the point in time that they actually secure a building permit, and then they actually pay their part.
Yeah. For example, we've dug in the last 9 years 3 new wells in the city, strictly for growth. We have plenty of water for the amount of homes currently, but these wells are to accommodate new homes that are being built. So the fact that pipes might connect directly to the home has not paid for a share of the new well, each of which are hundreds of thousands of dollars just to dig the test wells, and then to perfect the well is $1 million. And so that's an example of that system. And then the city of North Ogden, being built largely on a hill, has multiple pressure zones where we have one of the most complex water systems, even though we're not that big of a city, because of our multiple pressure zones as we go up the hill. Pressure reduction valves, several $100,000 each. In each of those zones, have several of them. And there's all this infrastructure to ensure that the water can be moved up or down the hill through those different zones at the right pressure to not cause problems for all the homes on the line. That has to be paid for proportionally each new home that is built, beyond just the cost of the pipes. And so we're very sympathetic to the points that have been raised there by people I respect, but the impact fee is for the house, not the person. And when someone moves from one house in the city to a new house, someone's moving to the old house. And now there's 2 families where there were one before. And so there has to be a new impact fee paid regardless of how long homeowner A has lived in that city, because one household now became 2 in that transaction. And hence why we don't feel there's any justification legally to not charge the same impact fee to a new home that's being constructed, regardless if it's a brand new person or a longtime resident, because it's based on the impact of that new home on the wells, on all of the infrastructure of the city. So my recommendation is not to change the impact fees, because we have more building going on than ever before in the city's history. This year will probably be 150 building permits, which is far more than any previous year. The building is going through the roof, and there's a lot of infrastructure to, go with all of that. And lowering an impact fee, I can't see the reason to do it, because the market is bearing the cost. They're justified. We don't create our impact fees ourselves. We have professional consultants who determine the impact fees, which we're going through that process, as you all know, to update our impact fees now. Our transportation impact fee is a good example. We had a professional traffic engineer do that fee, and they determined what it should be. And then those of you that were here at that time, or maybe it was everyone on the current council, we cut that substantially from what was justified by the study to ensure that we were not near the edge of justification. So that's my summary I'll give you, because it's not a fun issue. It's one we wish we didn't have to collect, but I don't see lowering them being a positive thing for the city. Any reduction in impact fees, when you're talking 150 permits this year, is hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost revenue to the city that will need to be made up some other way.
Yeah, I just to somewhat reiterate what I think I said, and the mayor is saying as well, that there's a pretty rigorous study that they have to do. That they do that study in a rigorous way so as to be able to withstand any challenges to the study. And so I build some confidence that when those studies are done and they establish what the impact fees are, if we don't charge that amount of money, we will likely end up having to fund the infrastructure and wells and pump houses and so on out of other funds if we don't collect the amount that they've put together in this rigorously developed model. I'd like them to be less, for sure.
Well, if you'd like them to be less, you could move them.
Yeah.
Well,
The city council
convince us that we won't be paying for it in some other way if we do. That's
well, I guess John, let me ask you some questions. Okay?
Yep.
My understanding, if I understand this wrong, explain it to me so I understand it right. Okay. Impact fees cannot be used on current infrastructure. It has to be used for new infrastructure.
Correct. Yeah. It's called operations and maintenance. It can't go to pay salaries or to fix broken things.
Okay. And so I guess in my mind, I look at this and I say, okay, an impact fee that we're charging is to help pay for new infrastructure only. And I look at it and I say, and I can't get past this thing that we have somebody who lives in the city for 50 years, and part of his taxes has really gone to pay for that infrastructure that's in the ground. But the guy that's building the new house has never paid into any of that infrastructure.
So the property taxes from the property would have, but not at the same rate as a single-family home. And, sorry, I also need to fix something I said earlier. There's also what's called excess capacity. Mm-hmm. So if we have a line that will treat 100 or take care of 100 homes and only 80 are using it, we can charge 20% of the cost of that line to impact fees. But that's not, so that still is counted as a future growth project. It's just something that we've already built. It's like the mayor said, we're paying ourselves back. So I just wanted to make sure that I was answering the question the way you'd asked it.
Well, what I'm getting at is in my way of thinking, we're charging impact fees to replace or to build new infrastructure, and so the study ought to say, okay, here's what our planned infrastructure is. This is where we plan to spend the money before we could charge a certain fee. But I guess I look at it and I say, okay, part of the fee, for example, on water, part of the fee for sewer, that I may have paid for, and I've lived in the city for close to 50 years, that I may have been paying to this city for 50 years. Part of that fee that I pay every month actually goes towards infrastructure too, because we set it aside in some, we are starting to set it aside in an account, so that'll pay for those old repairs that have to be done. I guess I look at infrastructure as impact fees as somebody buying into our system that we already have going. And I look at somebody that's been here 50 years, they've been buying into that system for an awful long time. According to what you're showing here, we can't do anything about that unless we go to the legislature and get a change put in there.
Because I don't think that perspective is wrong, Councilman. It's just, let me turn it a little bit, because
if it's not wrong, then don't even treat it.
I mean, I know where you're coming from, because I've talked to the same people that, again, I don't like charging this kind of a large fee to a longtime community member that I like too, but the home that has been paying those fees is going to be inhabited by someone new. They could be from out of the state that have never paid a cent.
Charge him the impact fees.
That maybe that's an option then. It's waived on the new house, but whoever moves in has got to pay an impact fee, because that homeowner, if they have lived here 50 years and live 50 more in their same house, they'll never get charged an impact fee. It's the act of building a new house that has the exact same impact of anyone from California moving in. By building a new house, They moved out of home A, built home B. We now have home A and home B on the infrastructure. It's no different than someone moving in from out of state and just building home B. I mean, it's painful, but it just is what it is. There's now 2 homes on the city infrastructure with 2 families.
That's why we're probably going to see more tiny homes built around here. And why you're seeing that across the country, why people want to live in tiny homes, because they don't want to pay as much as impact fees as they could pay to build a tiny home. Up in the Northwest right now, and I know that, they're more liberal up there than we are here, but up in the Northwest and parts of Oregon and Washington, there's whole communities of those tiny homes being built that are neighborhoods because of the cost that it's driving. And, I just worry about the cost of, frankly, when I sell my home, I'm probably not going to build here because the impact fees are pretty high.
Well, another case in point, somebody has a home, and it's an old home, and that home paid impact fees when it was originally built.
Probably not, because they didn't have them then.
Let's say
potentially.
They did. Potentially, if it's old, that old. But there are homes. One of my daughter-in-law's father and his wife have come to the area, and they were looking at a home where they would have to demo the home and want to build a new home. Well, for that home, that property, the impact fees have already been paid. And so when they build a new home, they won't pay impact fees again.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. But if they're going to build a new home on property that's never been used before, we theoretically have built the infrastructure, the pumping capacity, and enough well flow so that we can handle all of the residents plus the growth, and those impact fees theoretically are helping us pay back ourselves for the investment we made to have future homes in the city, to have the water and the piping to handle the sewer and storm drain for new residents,
yes.
new homes.
So a good example of that is the Ace Hardware store. It replaced a larger store with less, you could say, impervious surface, water requirements, traffic, and so they actually don't have an impact fee because you look at what was there before, what's coming in now, and they actually have some more space on their impact fees for the future buildings they're going to put in. But we're tracking it really closely to make sure that as soon as they go over that historic investment in the infrastructure, they have to pay it. But it's tied to the property because Smiths didn't get to take it and move it to their new building. They had to pay it. They had to pay it entirely for the new building. It stays with the tax ID number, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's a good point because their impact fees were hundreds of thousands, but because they'd been here for a long time, they didn't get any exception on it. They moved to a totally new property. Someone moved to their old property. Now there's 2 impacts, so Smiths had to pay a whole new impact fee for their new building. And as John has described, Ace Hardware is the beneficiary of the investment into that infrastructure in Smiths. Just like if somebody builds a new home and they sell their old home, the person who moves into that old home is the beneficiary of their past investment into the city's infrastructure, whereas the new home, like any other new home, has to pay an impact fee. If someone were, let's say, tearing down their old home and not building a new one, or not selling it to another family, maybe we could waive it in that case. But that's obviously not practical. It doesn't make financial sense. Most people sell their old home, and like I say, there's now 2 families on the city's infrastructure, and a new impact fee. I can't see any justification to not charge a new impact fee because there's a new family on the infrastructure, which is the whole point of the impact fee.
There is, because we do see how high the fees are, there's a real justification for us to question in detail the studies that justify what impact fees. We need to be sure that they really are justified, and that that's the amount of money that we really do need to collect. And we know that that's been challenged before in the Lehigh, where they maybe arbitrarily raised it, but you can come in with the same kind of people that do those studies and establish that it really shouldn't have been that high, and that could happen to us, should happen to us if it's justified. So we are motivated to make sure those impact fees aren't too high, but that they're high enough so that we don't have to add other funds to build the infrastructure needed for growth.
And just as another side note, 20% of the impact fees are pass-throughs where the city collects it for the fire district and the sewer district. And so 20% of the fees are even out of your control. But you will remember what you're just talking about with the traffic impact fee. Councilman Uri asked several questions that we went back and asked the consultant, and they said, that could be seen as a justification to reduce the fee. And so the original fee was much higher than was finally adopted, in part because of the thoroughness of the council going through the reports and making sure that the consultant had asked every question that you had on your mind that could be considered relevant. So
Mayor, you made reference to perhaps I was representing people that I know and like. Yes, I'm representing myself, and I like myself. Okay, and so I'm going to tell you right now, if I did sell my house and build here in North Ogden, I'd raise the price by the amount of impact fees to sell my house.
I couldn't disagree with you, especially in this market. You could.
You can do it.
I mean, I know what I know. That's what I'd do. If I was going to build another house, I'd add another 18 grand to the price I wanted to sell the house for.
So it's a topic that as you all know, the worst part of this job is fees and taxes. But I just don't see any reason to make a modification that is justifiable to the whole citizens of the city when every new home pays an impact fee, because it's a new person moving into the city's infrastructure.
And John, I would say we had some comments earlier about what a realtor had to say about the impact fees, and I would suggest that as I understood those comments, that those, some of them were not correct.
Well, like I said, there are people who don't. It's very complicated. There was a large entity in Utah County that had expert consultants do a bunch of work for them, and they just paid out a huge settlement for impact fees, tens of millions of dollars, because the paperwork was wrong. And so it's more complicated than most people will admit. And developers realize it's complicated, which is why they don't challenge every impact fee, because there's a million different ways to cut the apple. And so it's just one of those things where the state code is not as clear as sometimes I wish it was. But they've tried to make it more clear on impact fees, and I think they're going to make more revisions again this year to clean up some more issues. But it'll never be. Not everyone will understand it, even the folks who are passing the bills sometimes. So, I'm giving you my legal analysis. There might be another attorney who says, you know what, John's absolutely wrong. So,
I may be wrong, and I may be going out on a limb to say what I'm going to say now. But if we didn't have if the impact fee was not charged to the homeowner, who would be having to pay that? Would be the builder.
So it's the person. Right now, our system is set up so it's paid by the person who constructs the home.
So the builder pays it.
It depends on how the contract's set up with who eventually buys it. But Ivory Homes, for example, build all their homes and then they sell them at a set price. They don't, so the homeowner, it's worked into the price as far as the profit they make, but there are individuals out there who will hire a contractor and pay all the fees and all the stuff up front.
And they hire a
Yeah.
contractor.
And so it's hard to say exactly who's paying the fee other than it's the person who's building the house.
If we had no impact fees, the way to collect that would be to say to the builder, okay, builder, you've got to put this infrastructure in at your cost. And we're not gonna, the city's not gonna participate in any cost of it. And so in some ways, I look at it and say, okay, this is a way for the building lobbyists in the legislature to say, hey, let's pass that cost on to somebody else.
I think impact fees are actually a way that were instituted by the building community to avoid that scenario that you're talking about, because there were communities who were saying, we won't let you build a house unless you drill a well for us. And the costs were getting so high that the builders across the nation, and in Utah in particular, Florida was the first one who did an impact fee kind of plan across the state. But they basically said cities are gouging us, so we want them to put on paper what we're paying into so that we know they're spending it the way that's supposed to be spent. So it actually was kind of a compromise that both sides, that makes sense for both sides. It doesn't make it any easier for everyone to agree on what the value should be, just that there has to be some documentation to back it up.
Well, it still goes back to us making sure that the studies were done, and they're done in a rigorous enough way that we really know it's the right number. But this State Code 1136A and so on, 4031B, says that if we do not charge the full impact fee, we've got to go find somewhere else in our budget to do that. And if we did that for...
And we can't, and according to what he's read there, we can't waive them for an individual homeowner just for those specific things that he mentioned.
Yeah, right.
That was also put in at the request of the building association so that it was fair. I mean, the purpose of an impact fee, like John said, I mean, an individual property in the olden days before standardized impact fees might have a lesser or higher impact, but essentially the compromise, if you want to call it, with city governments, building officials, or developers was that it would be a standardized fee based on reasonable projections and studies, actual projects. And instead of trying to determine exactly, yeah, this subdivision needs to drill a well, this subdivision needs to put in a regional detention basin. So it is a standardized fee. I wanted to pull this up. This is from a few years ago, Council. We had our study done to determine, and probably just go to the summary page and the last page. This is without our transportation impact fee. This was part of implementing our transportation impact fee. So before that was implemented, our impact fees, taking out the ones that aren't our fee, the fire district, the sewer district, North Ogden City's impact fees were at approximately $8,000. The average of cities that we looked at in this study, which was, we looked at cities in our area, Weber County or Box Elder, and maybe I think a couple in Davis, and then also cities across the Wasatch Front that were an average for our size. The average of all of them was right around what we were charging. Granted, we then increased with a transportation impact fee and are higher than that average, but still not substantially. So yes, our fees are higher than the average, but it's largely because we have a transportation fee, which most cities don't. So comparing, our sewer and water and parks and stormwater to most other cities' sewer and water and parks and stormwater is very similar. We're very similar. But when we add in that we also charge a transportation impact fee, which relatively or far fewer cities do charge, then we are higher than the average. But, that's just a little context for you. I don't think North Ogden's fees by any means are excessive. They are higher than many of our immediate neighbors, but not, I don't think apples to apples, substantially higher, especially when you consider that we have a transportation impact fee that many cities do not. And I think it's hugely important. That's how we're doing a massive widening project of our main intersection. The transportation impact fee is a huge part of providing that additional new capacity, which is needed because of growth. Every new house brings 2 to 3 or 4 new cars. They're paying a transportation impact fee, and a big chunk of the city's portion of this upcoming widening project is coming from that transportation impact fee. So just a little more information for you.
So strictly speaking, state code does not allow us to do what's been
So if
requested.
we wanted to wait for anybody, we can't, according to the state code.
That would be my recommendation.
Well,
In
I'm not
particular,
interested in your recommendation. I'm interested in what the code says.
that's the way I read the code.
Did you pull the code up?
I can grab it if you want. Sorry, it's going to sound like I'm. The law firm I just left is the expert in impact fees in the state. The entity that paid tens of millions of dollars was to a lawsuit filed by that law firm, and so there's not many people in the state who really understand impact fees and can, and that's my understanding of the law. You can't waive them unless you waive them for everybody, and if you discount them, then we'll be the poster child for a home builder coming in to sue the city and say you can't give them a break and not us, because we're starting to get the big Salt Lake players up here building in our city, and it's too big of a risk to play too loose with the numbers.
Well, who brought the suit against Layton? East Layton was the Home Builders Association.
Yeah. And Lehigh actually went through 2 rounds of losses. One was they reached a settlement and paid out a fee, and the second one was just an individual, because it wasn't necessarily that what the city was trying to do was inappropriate, it's because they didn't follow their document. And that's what they lost on, was it wasn't in the document. They just bumped the fee because they said we want 10% as a cushion. So it was an
amount was not justified by the study.
Yeah, it wasn't in the paperwork. So.
So what's the question before us tonight?
The question is, what would you like us to do further research, bring back a proposal of some kind? What would you like us to do with this item?
Well, the item is precipitated from a request by residents, and I think that the code, the recommendation by staff, based on the state code, is that our hands really are tied, and there's nothing, we cannot do that. So I think it's end of story, except for the whole discussion is a motivation to be sure that we're getting the studies done rigorously enough that it can withstand, well both. Number one, it can withstand any challenge, and number two, that we really are generating the funds that we really are going to need to build the wells and the infrastructure to accommodate new homes.
Any other discussion or comments on this item?
Do we want more study done? I just want to be sure that and I know we're in the process of doing the more impact fee studies, but that we do them right so that we're on firm ground. Both we have the confidence that we've going to be able to pay for what we have to put in infrastructure, and that we can withstand any challenge.
And this is part of why we are now, first in this budget and more so in all future budgets, are segregating impact fees from the rest of funds in our utilities so that it's very clear where the impact fees have been used, to make that even more clear.
It should be go beyond that, Mayor. It should not be very clear where the impact fees have gone. Where are they going? There ought to be a plan put in place for those.
And each fund has a capital plan of where, for the next years.
A long-range plan, out 5-6 years, maybe even.
What the horizon on the impact plans typically, John, is like 25 years, or what is it?
So they'll do a
6 years to spend it.
What, yeah.
Yeah. So typically, what they do is they do a build out plan. Because usually most cities are within 30 to 50 years of build out, and then they'll identify several projects for that's what we did for our transportation, and they categorized them and said these are 30 to 50, these are 15 to 30, these are less than 15, and then they took the less than 15 and said here's the ones that are most likely to happen in 6 years. And so it starts at the 50,000 foot view and then scales it back down to that 6 to 10 year window of what actually, and that's what we collect on. The other stuff is more just kind of background information to help guide the next time that we look at everything, to say what projects have been completed, what needs to be done, and what should be modified out of that plan moving forward. So they try and start large and dial it back, and have that kind of scope for the whole city to build out. And I think our build out is scheduled for 2045 based on growth projections.
There's no action that needs to be taken tonight on this subject. Okay. Been a good discussion. Maybe not one that we're all happy with, but it's been a good discussion.
There's one more thing I'm going to send to you, John, just to pull up for information for council, for our citizens who have asked about this item. I'm emailing it to you now. That just shows that one I'd sent, or we pulled up here a minute ago, didn't have some of the city names, but just to show you, nearby cities.
Well, to me, Mayor, there's so many variables that can go into what nearby cities are. For example,
absolutely,
I would think that our neighbor Pleasant View probably ought to have a pretty good water impact fee, because they got to find some water before they can allow people to build.
It didn't have an attachment.
They may not have the street things that we have with the Monroe going in and a widening of a road. So maybe they don't need a.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Every city is different. Like our water impact fee is one of the highest because, again, we have a water system that is unique because we're not on flat terrain. We're on very mountainous terrain. So, admittedly, Councilman, yes, this just is, and again, this is a couple of years old as well. But you can see, scroll to the bottom, maybe, John. This includes building permit fees, plan check, the whole kit and caboodle, minus, in North Ogden's case, again, minus, actually, can you go so we can see the names at the top?
They're right here.
Oh, the names are there too, okay. So minus, in North Ogden's case, that was before our transportation impact fee of a couple $1,000s was added. So it's zero here, but, Perry, 14,000, 782, Brigham 8,500, Tremonton 88, Willard 13,000, Bear River 21,000, Pleasant View 12,000, North Ogden almost 15,000, Plain City 10,500. So just to again show kind of the differentiation in various cities and where they stand. Once we added a transportation impact fee, which you can see almost none of those cities, other than $166. Oh, that's a transportation fee. The only one charging a transportation fee in that whole list at that time was Bear River of $3,200. So apples to apples, if you take our transportation impact fee out, I don't think we're unusually high by any means. We're definitely at the higher end compared to others, but not like in, completely uncharted territory. And then we have a transportation impact fee. Many other cities are putting them in, and I expect it will not be long before most cities have them, just the same as a sewer or water or another impact fee, because cities are struggling to pay for road projects that are needed because of growth. So while we were one of the first to implement it, we're certainly not the last. So that's just some more information. So any further discussion you want to have on this item?
Cheryl wanted to say something.
Well, the Pleasant View, if they don't still have a moratorium, they have had. That's a good case in point where they didn't have the impact fees input that would fund building the infrastructure so they could bring in new homes. So nobody can build in Pleasant View right now.
Yeah, their water at this time, I don't know if it's changed, but was Pleasant View slightly less than ours. Theirs was 3,000, ours was 3,300. So, but they have a lot of the topography we do in terms of terrain for infrastructure needed to move water up and down the mountain. Okay. Any last discussion or further guidance on this one? Okay, then we'll move to item number 8, which is our last main item for the night. Discussion and or action to consider the code enforcement position. As you're aware, Council, we've discussed this in some previous meetings. We have a part-time code enforcement position in the city, and in this most current budget had recommended trying a part-time building inspector position to help control costs in the city. Our code enforcement officer subsequently, we didn't know this at the time of the budget, was hired as the new animal control officer, a full-time position. And so we've also struggled to find a building inspector. We're concerned about the retention of a building inspector in the current environment where building is so hot. It's been more of a difficulty than we had anticipated. And once the current code enforcement officer had moved to the animal control position, we thought it might be a unique opportunity to create the two positions, the part-time code enforcement, part-time building inspector, into one full-time position instead, in order to provide a better career path and retention for especially that building inspector position. And also the code enforcement has traditionally been housed in the building area, so there's a lot of sense and some reasons to have those together. So you had some questions for us on some things to research further. John has researched that and has some information to present to you tonight about what the cost impacts would be of that.
So, Council, just to remind you real quick, this is the same graph you saw last time that shows that essentially what we're talking about is this $40,000 bump for the benefit cost, as well as some additional cost for an hourly wage increase, because the building inspector typically makes more than code enforcement. And Councilman Uri had asked for us to compare side by side what the costs were by using an outside consultant. And in this, I tried to make some assumptions, so I'll try and explain those as best I can. The assumption was with the full-time hours that are listed here at 11,400 was that they'd be out in the city for 8 hours a day, doing roughly 30 inspections a week, or 100 to 120 a month, which meant we paid the trip fee for them to come from their Layton office to us once or 20 times. So that's why the half-time isn't exactly half of what the full-time is, because with the half-time, you're paying the same amount for the trip fees with the assumption they'd be out here 4 hours a day. but you're getting less bang for the buck on the hour. Does that make sense? That the trip fee isn't divided into as many inspections, if that makes sense. And then the very bottom one, I put what it costs for us to have a full-time inspector is essentially $8,000 a month. That includes training and vehicle costs to keep them able to do what they need to do. It doesn't include the overhead to run the department, partly because we're going to have that overhead whether it's a contract employee or not. Does that make sense? Like Sue is still going to be scheduling building permits no matter who she's scheduling it with. And so there's a lot of things that it doesn't matter whether it's a contract attorney or contract building inspector or not. And so that's kind of the rough numbers. What other questions can I answer, or?
Well, I guess, a question that's come to my mind is we're going to have somebody that's going to be doing building inspections as well as code enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And the good book says you can't serve two masters, because you'll either
despise the one
and
hate the
love
other.
the other, or hate the one. Okay, so who will that be? You, or who will be saying you're going to spend 50% of your time doing code enforcement and 50% of your time doing inspections? Who's going to run that?
So, and essentially until Gary comes back in another month and a half, it would be me. I'm the one who's in charge of the department, and even will continue to be so until Gary, even after Gary comes back. But Gary has been the one who's managed the code enforcement position for the city for the past, well, as long as we've had code enforcement, so 10 years or something like that. I think you remember, some of you might remember, we used to have a full-time code enforcement. The downturn caused us to eliminate that to a half-time position or part-time. It actually went away for a while, and building just took care of it. And then we added the half-time position back. And since we added the half-time position, we basically kept our code enforcement officers about a year, and then the two that we've had have left for full-time positions at other cities, or the one here with full-time here at the animal services. Did I get off track on your question? Yeah. Sorry,
I got off track. I'll give you a chance to get on track.
One thing I would add to that is that's why we like the flexibility of combining the two, because in the summer when building's up, we can flex them more.
Well, that's why code enforcement's up too, because that's when the weeds are growing.
True, but in the winter, snow parking is a big need. Or, parking during storms, getting cars off the road, and there's very little building, so we can have more code enforcement. There would never be none of one or the other, but it has a lot of flexibility in this setup versus we're concerned that the reality is we might just end up having to hire a full-time building inspector anyways and the part-time code enforcement. This combination, we feel we can do it with one person, which has the benefit cost, but it would still be less in the long run than a full-time building and a part-time code enforcement. And we can cover both positions a little bit more or less based on the time of year and what the demands are, especially in the building, because the building department is extremely busy right now and will probably be the priority of effort immediately, but with still time put on code enforcement. Councilman Turner?
This is only going to be for a year, though, because in a year from now, Gary's going to be gone, and we're going to have a full-time inspector, and then we may have to hire a part-time code enforcement.
Right.
I mean, so you say that that's your fear, but the reality is, a year from now, this is going to...
Right.
In fact, so that's part of the plan in my mind is we have both of our more senior, as far as seniority in the city, are looking to retire in the next several years. The hope would be that when Gary does finish and stop working part-time for the city anymore, that we actually would replace it with a part-time code enforcement, which now gives us 2 people in the department that understand code enforcement and the procedures, as well as keeps that full-time position and hopefully trains them, assuming that things continue to go like they have, as the person that carries the city into the future. Because I was talking with another individual today who basically says whenever a full-time position comes open in the county, all the other inspection folks apply for it so they can go back to their cities and say, hey, I got another job. I don't want to leave, so give me another $1 an hour. And so it's kind of there's not as many code or inspectors in the county, and it's just kind of it's a position that cities are guarding and protecting because it's hard to lose them, especially if you only got one person who knows what they're doing. So.
Well, after reading through your stuff, I'm comfortable with where their direction now, but I still have the concern that I expressed last time, and that is that, we're at 150 maybe building permits this year. If we drop to 75, then we need, this city needs to be willing to cut an employee then.
The good news is we have one retiring in a year. So that would be the point at which we wouldn't replace that individual if that happened, if the market goes down, and we'd stay where we're at. If the market does keep going, something like what John described could happen, where the code enforcement / building becomes full-time building and we go back to a part-time code enforcement. But we'll have that flexibility based on what's happening with the market.
Now, the other concern I was talking to a fellow today that lives in Utah County, and his friend is put money down to buy a senior kind of home on a patio home type deal, and I wish I could remember the name of the company he told me that's building the homes, but they called his buddy and gave his money back. They said they can't get enough workers. They are not going to go through and build the houses they plan to build.
Yep. Councilman Turner?
I think this is almost a must-do, and the reason I say that is because he's going to be retiring in a year. This gives this gentleman a chance to be trained by Gary a little bit, and we all know Bruce is going to be retiring within 5 years. I think he already told us 3 or something like that. But so this will give him a chance to train and learn, and then I think it's almost we need to do this.
Hasn't been discussed, but I think it's important to just get it out there that John has pointed out the value of having in-house inspections so that we can respond quickly rather than having to make a phone call. Unless we just had the contractor coming on a regular basis and just there's that much work, we're better off to have our own inspector and be able to. I think about somebody that had a problem up on my road, and there was some mix-up about the setbacks, and they ended up having to not pour cement and move the forms, that sort of thing. And the offer, as I understand it, in talking to our people, the offer was there we'll come and help you with this. You don't have to wait until the last minute when you have cement ordered to call us out for an inspection, and that wouldn't happen if we didn't have our own in-house person.
And one other thing that's been brought up, and the council hasn't asked about it, but we have examined our hiring policies because we don't want it to look like we brought someone in part-time with the plan to make them full-time. As the mayor mentioned, we didn't know code enforcement was leaving. In fact, that position, typically we can do an in-house advertisement for even full-time positions, and the police opted not to do that because we wanted to see who could come in. So there was even some worry that maybe anyone internally wouldn't get that job, and so we weren't counting our eggs or seeing which chicks were hatching before we knew what was happening. Otherwise, we probably would have advertised this as a full-time position if the timing had just worked out differently. But the 3 people who did apply for the part-time position and were interviewed, no one at the city knew them. So just so everyone's, I don't want it to appear like maybe someone's buddy got in. My understanding is that none of the individuals that we hired knew anybody who worked for the city or that we interviewed. So just, so that the public knows it wasn't something like that going on as well.
Just something that crossed my mind, and I'm sure you have an answer for it, but I'd like to hear the answer. Mm-hmm. Was there any thought given to maybe making the animal control part-time and code enforcement that into a job, joint code enforcement and animal control job?
There was some talk of that. There's also some departments, some cities do it that way, where the police department handles code enforcement and all the other things that go on, that would be seen as a typical kind of public interaction enforcement position. Other cities don't do that, and in large part it deals with the makeup of the police department as well as the makeup of the court. And so there's no wrong way or right way to do it. In our city, it works better to not have those two positions be in the same department. But that's something that
well, the question would be how much time is the animal control is 40 hours a week spent in animal control, or is more like 20 hours a week?
They definitely spend the time, and we did talk about it, but part of it is philosophical. We have tried to make code enforcement not be adversarial. It's very, very solution-based. Our code enforcement officers, in particular, the last two we've had have been fantastic for that, where we're not there to give a ticket. We're not there to start trying to, exert control or get in some kind of a back and forth match. It's really about, hey, the attitude is, the weeds are getting long here. Can you please take care of these? We only get to the enforcement if in very low percentage of the cases where low intensity, non-adversarial efforts are not successful. If it's in the police department, you kind of have a different feeling of it's criminal, which our code enforcement is not. The citations that are ultimately issued are civil citations. Even the winter parking ordinances are not a criminal citation. So Chief Warren feels there's a conflict there between animal control is a criminal position. If you get a citation from the officer, it could be a misdemeanor or an infraction, whereas code enforcement citations are civil citations. So we have felt there's a benefit in community goodwill in having the code enforcement be very strictly a civil position, not a uniformed police criminal type position. So that probably gives a little background on our kind of thinking on it as well, on why we want to keep the code enforcement separate from the police department.
Yeah. In fact, I was talking with the code enforcement officer today, and she mentioned that she had I hate to call it an altercation, but she had to call in some backup because of the situation escalated. And she specifically said, if I hadn't been wearing a uniform, I think it would have been fine. That if I was over here doing code enforcement, that this individual would have interacted with me differently than than me wearing a uniform. And so I think that's what the mayor's talking about. Is it makes it people don't make any assumptions when someone comes up to them with a North Ogden City shirt on and says, "Hey, I'm the code enforcement officer." So
it's been a real success, I think, having the code enforcement. How our last officers have approached it, we've given a lot of training, John and I, to them about expectations, that it is not adversarial unless all efforts have failed to produce compliance with the city ordinances. But the first visits are always unadversarial, focused on the solution, not getting into a battle. And I do think when you show up in a uniform, which our animal control officer does wear a uniform, that just is a different dynamic right from the get-go that in the long run, I think we would not want for the code enforcement.
Well, that didn't answer my question. How much time do they spend in animal control?
40 hours a week.
Well, I know that's what a lot of time is. But how much animal control?
The animal
work are they
control
actually
officer
doing?
also provides bailiff services for the court every single week, which, what do you think that is, John? I mean, depends on the number of cases, but maybe 3 to 4 or 5 hours.
And that position's also in charge of the evidence room and does fingerprinting. So there are, because like you said, some weeks there isn't a requirement for 40 hours of animal service. The police department has found several other jobs that need to be handled by a uniformed officer.
Hire somebody else to do
So
that.
the court, the evidence, fingerprinting, that's probably, not having the exact number off the top of our heads, is probably 10 hours a week on average of the animal control officer's time on other police functions. Which, that is new as well. Our animal control officer previously was part-time and did not do the evidence functions, but that was handled by a uniform officer who's now working on the streets instead of doing the evidence. So we think that's been a good change. Any other questions or discussion on this? Councilman Turner, did we get your question when you had your hand up a while back? Okay, or comment?
So what do you need? It says discussion or action to consider. So do we?
Yeah, if you're in favor of the proposal we've made, we would love a motion to that effect, because then we'll move forward with this plan.
And bring back the budget amendment as well.
Right.
But it's good to have the official approval from you so that we can then bring back the budget amendment that would essentially pay for the approval.
Well, I'm not going to make a motion. The last one didn't even get seconded.
Go ahead and try again, Austin.
Be brave.
So I make a motion that we approve code enforcement
We're approving
building
the budget
inspector
amount.
full-time. What's
aren't
that?
we? We're approving a budget amount to
Budget amount to do that, yeah, so that we can
9-something
proceed
thousand.
that way.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve
Second it
the
either.
proposal for a full-time code inspector / code enforcement / building inspector. And I'm assuming the motion includes to bring the budget amendment back to you for further approval.
Yes.
Second, concur with that. Okay, so we have motion and a second then to approve this proposal. Is there any further discussion? Start the voting with Councilman Satterthwaite.
Yes.
Councilman Uri.
My questions have been answered, yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We know, Councilman Uri, that whenever we have a proposal, we do the Councilman Uri test among ourselves to make sure we're ready to go. What are the kind of questions you might ask? So that's very healthy for us, because it ensures we have thought through things as well.
So in December, you're going to breathe a sigh of relief.
No.
Cheryl's going to start taking this on as well, the Councilwoman Stoker test. Okay, move on to item 9 then. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd love to hear from any of you on any of the items tonight or any other item of public business.
Steve O'Bray, 3185 North, 100 West in North Ogden. I wanted to just tell you I see how hard you've worked tonight, and you've worked really hard, especially even on this fee for the building, home builders, and tried to work something out, and you brought a lot of things out. John's legal analysis, what he feels like this code covers and what this should be is his opinion. And then I know that's far different than Gage Floor and what his opinion is, and he did ask me to make sure I wrote down the code and gave that to him, which I will, so that he can give his opinion of it. And for what he had, said before, he felt like the city could, have more control over what they actually charged on the impact fees. It isn't turning out the way I wanted it to turn out, but still, again, I appreciate all of you. You're hard workers. You're trying hard to get these problems resolved. I was hoping that it would be around 12,000, not 18,000. How much does the city get for property taxes?
About
What percentage?
11% of the property tax you pay
Goes to the city for your...
Of the whole bill.
You know, yeah, but for, so that the city can function and pay for all the things.
It's
And
about $200 an average home in the city a year, roughly.
Because I know what we pay is a tremendous amount of money. You'd get more than 200, and then we have a little house. And the house that we had proposed that we wanted to build, we have cut back on the plan 3 times, and we can only, I don't think that we'd get it, get the plan approved to be finished plan if we don't finish at least the upper floor. So we've even cut out the bottom, all the bottom floor, changed the exterior, and we are not rich. We either cannot build or we will have to hold on to it, as you brought out in the meeting last Tuesday, that I would have a year to try and generate the money to at least get it started and go through. This will be my last house, I know, in my lifetime, but we have a good contractor who is from North Ogden, and he helped with the remodel on the home that we're in now and did a wonderful job. But we would like to move to the new place, but we'll just have to wait, I'm sure, and until we can get just that few thousand where we can at least get the okay, as far as passing inspection to get the upper floor totally finished. And then try and work on a lesser quality exterior. But anyway, that's the only thing that I can think that we could do to make it possible for us to be able to do that. I know that by doing so, again, it would generate another house because we'd sell the older house. I know I couldn't put the 18,000 on top of it and expect to sell it, because then we wouldn't, we want to sell that to make sure we have the money to have everything paid for, and that's why we were working really close. But if I put 18,000, I know they would just laugh and say, "We'll go down the street and get."
I don't know. I read reports. I read reports all the time of people that are getting more than they asked for.
I would say put it on, Mr. Obrey, and see what happens, because houses sell within hours or minutes in the market right now, especially in North Ogden.
But we will try, but we may have to wait just a little bit before we pick up the plans. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for your efforts. You've tried to throw this out and negotiate it. And like I say, as I talked with Mr. Frohr, he, felt like that the cities did have leeway. He thought that you should put more on taxes and not try and get so much on the infrastructure.
Can I just respond a little bit to that property tax issue?
But everybody has to.
I've got it right in front of me. Our 2016-17 current year property taxes are $1,172,194. That's just $50,000 above what it was the year before. So $50,000, if you split that up among the infrastructure that needs to go in, is not going to go very far.
No, and that's why if they were a little higher and everybody was paying more in, it would help a little. And I'm just saying that.
Sure.
But I could afford that a little bit more monthly than, because we're on a set income and than to come up with a big bunch of money right in the beginning. But anyway, I thank you so very, very much, and this has been very educational. And you guys are heroes, and ladies, you are. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Obrey.
Politicians won't get reelected if they raise taxes. If they raise fees, nobody knows about it, so they get reelected.
Susan Clement, 668 East, 3125 North. I agree. I think this is a great discussion on impact fees, and it's been quite an education. I thought it was interesting. I was listening last week on YouTube, and I could hear everybody wonderful, except for Mr. Uri.
I don't like to be heard.
You have that subtle, silky voice that's really hard to hear over YouTube, and I get hear, and you say some really good things. When I'm sitting here, I can hear you very well, but on YouTube, I can't.
Good. I don't want to be an actor.
No, I don't. But I want to know what you're saying.
Okay.
I like the
Could you say
silky
some good
part.
stuff? The silky part. And I thought it was really interesting that Mr. Shoup, who was I don't know if he was your typing teacher when you were when you were at Walkwest Junior High, and the same discussion about the impact fees and how much, 18,000 every time you build a new home, correct?
I think that's with the building permit
The building
and the plan check, and then the sewer impact and the fire impact as well.
Right, 18,000. That's a lot of money. So you have to make a decision. Are you going to buy an existing home, or are you going to build a new home? If you build a new home, you've got $18,000 that you got to come up with somewhere. If you buy an existing home, you don't. When we purchased our home 22 years ago, we didn't have to pay that impact fee because it was an existing home. But the word here is impact, because when you build a new home, you have an impact on the community and the infrastructure. I'm wondering if we want to add onto that impact fee for deer location.
Not discount.
That is a fair question.
Just an idea, because if you've got all this growth going on in North Ogden, you got to put the deer somewhere, and they are having an impact, and we can't charge
a lot of the
them.
comments online centered on just that a lot of the deer are coming down because the houses have gone higher than in
yes.
past years on the
They
mountain.
definitely have. Yes, and I kind of feel like, too, when I was young and I was raised in this area, there were a lot more dogs out roaming around. And I don't think the deer dare come down here because they'd be chased by the dogs. Well, most dogs are inside now or behind a fence. And so
being treated better than many children back in those days. So
yes. Also, we might want to consider adopt a deer program. If people don't want them shot, then why don't you adopt a deer and we'll take it and we'll move it southern Utah or Idaho or somewhere. So anyway, that's my ideas.
Thank you, Mrs. Clemens.
Put the fence up 9 feet.
Again, Carl Harper on the proposed land. I just wanted to make a comment, and we just found this out today, the northwest corner of that ground, and I appreciate the cost because the cost on the cement seemed to be outrageous. Yeah. And one reason Kurt Boyer said that, and I want to make that clear, is he doesn't know what that northwest corner is. It dives down to the other fence.
Oh, okay.
And if you don't need a retaining wall in that section, that cost is way low. So I wanted to make that point. And that's what he told me this morning. He said, I'm just bidding it high because I don't know what you're going to do. And we don't know when that parking lot's ever going to be finished. So I look over, and I haven't got a fence yet, and I look at that retaining wall, and there's the beautiful weeds growing all over it. And over to the west where those senior citizens would walk down to this new park, and if you build the park, I'm happy. I don't have to spend 10 grand to just put a few trees and grass around. I'd be the happiest guy in the world. I can use the money somewhere else. But if you want me to take care of it, I'll take care of it. But and so that's fine with me. I'm concerned a lot by the weeds, and I'm concerned what you put next to it, because if you're going to put something next to it I don't like, please share the cost of the fence going down the side. Okay? Would that be all right? Okay. So if you take those things into consideration, I just want to make that point kind of clear, that that cost is really outrageous, and I appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Harper, and thank you for being willing to work with us on this. So we'll be right back in touch.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
You dated me.
Well, she said you.
How old I am.
Yeah, she didn't go out with you. She just had to. Let's clarify that.
Hey, I'm not going to take very long. This has been a long, long meeting, and my name is Jim Shoup, and I live at 276 East Alberta Drive. And I want to just say that my dad served 3 terms on the city council. And I remember the big deal back then, way back, was when they put in the sewer system here in North Ogden. And they wanted Pleasant View to go with them, and Pleasant View didn't. And my dad was really bothered because they thought they could save a little money if they went together. And then my grandpa was on the city council way before that. And I just remember he had strong opinions. I don't know a lot about what he did or what he didn't do. So I do have some sympathy for you and these long meetings every week. But you did apply for the job, and you got it. And you're
And we keep asking to do it again.
Either unfortunately you feel unfortunate or fortunate. I don't know which one. I want to just tell you that I do believe in impact fees. I don't have any quarrel with them. And I think I mentioned this to you once before. When we started building this new house, I figured maybe 8,000 or 10,000. I didn't even go above that. I thought, you know, to me that was reasonable. I didn't know what reasonable is, but I know what excessive is, or I think I do. But I just want to make a couple of comments about that. I do believe in the fees. I'm not opposed to having those fees. But as I've listened here a little bit, it sounds like you guys pass the buck. I mean, it's kind of like a lot of government agencies. We go back to a committee, we had somebody study it, we don't know who studied it, but I'm thinking that somewhere along this aisle, either one of you or 2 of you or 3 of you or all of you said, this is what we're going to charge for our impact fees. And I think I told you this before. When I saw what my impact fee was, that it was more than the house I'm living in now that I paid for in total. And you're saying that's reasonable? I'm saying that's excessive. And you're going to have to decide what's reasonable and what's excessive. But I would like to see that it boils down to what you people here alone determine what's right and what's wrong. I think I mentioned once before, everybody drives on these roads. Everybody drinks the water. Everybody flushes the toilet in the same sewer. Everybody can go to any of the parks. And I realize that everybody that comes in and builds a new house, whether they've lived here for 50 years like I have, and I've owned that property for 50 years. And I, 15 years ago, put in the water, sewer, electrical, the gas, built my shop. I had the orchard for years, so building this house now up there where I've always wanted to build it, I didn't have to go into the road. I didn't have to have any changes made to the water system or whatever, but I know I am going to use it. But I would just say, I just think you need to take a look at what you're doing. You can either tax people to death or you can fee them to death. And I think, you know, it's nice as politicians say we didn't raise taxes, but their fees can get out of control. And I think this is where you've, in my opinion, you're out of control. Somehow or another, I think there ought to be a combination of maybe a little more tax money coming in, although I don't want to pay taxes either, but I'm willing to pay a little. But a combination of fees and taxes, and not say, well, we know we're the highest around here. I don't think that's something that I would be proud to mention anyway. But I do thank you for everything you do. I love North Ogden. I've lived here all my life. I'm going to hopefully live all my life in that house I'm going to build. And so I'll just say thanks to all you have done, and I'll say amen.
Thank you, Mr. Shoup, and we sure appreciate all you've done and your whole family for this community, even though we don't have agreement on this exact item.
I'm Carol Obrey, and I live at 3185 North, 100 West, and I'm Steve Obrey's wife. And we've raised our boys here, and they've all graduated from Weber High, and we love North Ogden, and my only regret is that we didn't move here right after we got married. But we took us a while to leave Cache Valley. Now, one thing I don't understand is the transportation fee. I don't do Facebook, so I'm not looking at Facebook. But I do read your letter every month when you print it that comes in our bill. And I read the paper. So if they print the truth, I'll read it. But I don't understand the transportation fee. That it appears to me that the only people that are really paying on it are on the impact fees. And it should be part of our taxes. And taxes are something that we do have to pay every year, and you do expect them to go up. And you do expect your property to increase in value. So why wouldn't the taxes go up a little bit? And we voted for the bond for the library. Well, that's improving the community. We shop in North Ogden. We get our gas in North Ogden. So we're trying to support our community. And I just feel a real letdown when these impact fees are so high that it hinders you from being able to build. And like Jim, this is our last shot. Our next move will be the cemetery. And we do have that paid for. So, I just wish that you'd really consider what the needs of the people are that are living here and want to stay in North Ogden. And I do appreciate your work that you do. I know that it's a hard job for you, and we respect you, and we get out and vote. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Obrey. And I will just answer your question about the fee so you'll have the information. The transportation, probably the best way I could say, like this big intersection project we're doing at Washington Boulevard and 2600 North. It's a $10.5 million project, of which the city is paying $2 million. And that is going to come roughly about 40% from impact fees that are charged to the new homes, and then probably about 30% from the city's general fund and about 30% from the city's transportation utility fee, which we all pay $3 a month, current residents, for the city's roads, which has been used to do improvements. That's why we have such nice roads. All our main roads in the last 3 years have been resurfaced in the city. 1050, 1700, 2100, 450, Alberta, 3100 this year now has been completed. So we've been doing maintenance with it, but also it is going to go for this intersection project. And then because we had that $2 million from our impact fee, from our monthly utility fee, we were able to get $8 million in grants with using our $2 million as a match. So that's a big reason why we've done it. The commitment we made when the transportation impact fee was implemented, which I'll take ownership, it was at my recommendation and the council's approval, although it was a divided issue. The whole council didn't vote for it, but that money we've collected has enabled us to get millions of dollars more from federal grants, state grants, and able to do the road project that otherwise we would have had to have a massive property tax increase to do that project, to get that money. So I know that probably doesn't, resolve every question you had, but at least that answers the ones you had posed here. It's not just impact fees paying for a new road project like that. The impact fees pay part of it, but existing residents are contributing as well.
Jocelyn Oler at 687 East, 3050 North. I think I sent emails to all of you in March and then again in the past month or so. I'm in support of thinning out the deer population. I heard from 2 of the council members, and Phil came actually out to our orchard. It's just east of the junior high. I don't really want the city to pay for anything. I kind of wanted to just solve our own problem, but need permission to do so, and I don't think just going out there and shooting the deer is legal. So that's why I was trying to reach out and see what we could do. Growing up there, we saw maybe 5 deer all through growing up. I look pretty young, but I'm 30. So 30 years, maybe 5 deer, but about 7 years ago, we saw a few more deer that stay around. And the last time I was able to count them all together, 16 or 17 are out there. So I think it is a city issue. I think, like Cheryl was saying, I think it's unwise to not be proactive because they are growing. The herd's growing. I don't have tags on them, so I can't make sure, but there's some that I know are the same deer, And
started naming them yet?
Yeah.
Dasher and Dancer.
So really, I don't know if there. I know I think it was Highland, but one of the cities, the bow hunters had to be up higher, like in trees. So if they miss the deer, they're going into the ground. I know the deer in in the orchard, you can get within 5 feet. So I'm not sure if you're an experienced hunter, you could miss that. But I guess really it's a hobby for my dad, but it's turned into a business for me. And I guess if there were 2 deers in your driveway preventing you to get out, you would go around them. But once you get 16 or 20, I think you're just about to plow over them. You want an option to get to your job or to. The problem is, some people think they're just nibbling on the trees. They rub against the trees, and so mature trees they die. So we have to take those trees out and then plant new young trees. But then the deer really chew on those, so they really have little chance to grow. In the last 5 years, we've taken 75 to 100 trees out. So it's not like 10 trees that are being killed, and so that's lost yields, that's time, money, everything. And I know it's not your orchard and it's not your life, but I think most of the citizens in North Ogden like open land, and for the farmers who haven't already sold off their land for development, in order to promote them to keep farming, you have to protect their land, their crops. The orchard also provides a lot of the youth jobs in the summer, and I'm biased, but the fruit's awesome. So anyway, I just want an option.
I've had it.
I don't actually want the city to have to put up a big bill, and relocation, if you look into it, is not super successful, and it is very expensive. So I'm not a huge advocate of that, but an option where experienced hunters could come in and thin the population. Obviously, I'm more concerned about my orchard, but it is a growing problem all over the city. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ms. Oler. Does anyone have any questions, Council? Because those are some great points and very helpful to get that. Thank you for staying and giving that input.
And I would say, even if we could foot some of the bill to bring, I don't know how it would work with DWR, but some of the experienced bow hunters or how they do that, we would be willing to foot some of the bill, even just to thin the herd. Some people I was reading and researching that the deer will learn if you kill 1 or 2. I don't know if that's true. But even if we could take out a few and see what their reaction is, that would be helpful. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Then let's go on. We'll start with our staff comments. Annette, our city recorder, anything?
I have a document going around. I don't know if it's who's got that, but if you'll get it back to me, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. John, city administrator, attorney?
Nope, nothing else.
Okay. Let's start right in the middle tonight. Councilman Uri.
Well, I would just say this about taxes. I don't like to pay taxes any more than anybody else. But I do have to agree somewhat on fees, and the one that really sticks in my mind we don't have anything to do with. Some years ago, our state legislature said, we're not going to let you pay a vehicle tax on your when you register your vehicle anymore. That's not a tax. It's going to be a fee. Well, I defy you to go down and pay that fee anymore and see that about 1/10 of it goes to registration fees on your vehicle. Some of it goes to keep the zoo up, and there's about 20 things listed that fee includes now instead of your vehicle. And so I think we need to, but I will say this, I don't think this council or this, the city employees in this city have ever spent a fee for something that it was not meant to be spent for. It was, if they're collected for that, they will be spent for that and not for something else that we didn't.
Thank you. Agreed. Councilman Turner?
I've noticed with all these new subdivisions and stuff, there's adjacent neighborhoods, and the roads are getting pretty hammered. What is our policy, ordinance, or whatever it is that on how far the developers are supposed to repair the roads adjacent to the subdivisions? I don't know if you have an answer. I just know for a fact for Rice Creek, the street I live on, and the street on 850 have been hammered by those big trucks, and they're getting ready to pave, and they're not even fixing, any of the stuff that's like just north of me. I know over by Lynn's house, they've done those curb cuts, those cuts across the road, and I know they're supposed to do a T-patch, but they're going to beat the heck out of those roads, and so I don't know what our policy is, but we definitely, in my opinion, the developer needs to fix what they've damaged. And, in my profession, if I'm doing a job, I go take pictures, before and after pictures, so I know what I've damaged. And maybe we need to start considering maybe sending somebody out before they start a job, take pictures of the adjacent roads, because I was talking with Justin, and he said that, that road was kind of, there were some repairs and stuff on that road adjacent to the subdivision. It was looking kind of bad anyway. I know for a fact they've damaged that road because I watched it, and they're not fixing it. And so that just frustrates me. Why all the residents in the city should have to pay for a developer who has damaged a road. So I don't know what the policy is, but we probably need to review that or look at it, or I'm more than willing to go and ride around and look at stuff with guys and anyway.
John, do you have something on that you can say now, or do we need to research it a little?
Need to do some research, and look at what the ordinance says, but Justin would be the one who would know more than I would at this point, but I can talk to him, and then it might be worth putting in something that says that regardless of what happens when you're repaving, you got to put 100 feet of, pavement in on the connecting road. But
yeah, wouldn't be hard to add.
100 feet would just about take care of everything they did by my place.
Because when we have new developments, give us the money to be able to do the slurry seal on their road a year after at the same time, because then there's an economies of scale. So we could potentially look at doing something similar where the next time we're resurfacing, the developer has to pay the cost of the resurface. We do that every year. So, but we'll research that.
Well, if you look at the road, even 850 or the road right next to mine, and if you look at it, it has to be repaired. Or the winter, we're going to plow it, and it's going to be all skinned up, and we'll be replacing it next year. So, anyway. I'd just like to have somebody review that, just because I think that we need to make sure it gets done right.
And I think to answer your question on the road on 2850 or 2750.
2750.
My understanding, and I'll double check with Justin, but I think the developers are repaving that whole road, which is why they didn't put in the T-patches. But
they should be repaving that whole road.
Yeah, I think that's
same idea.
I think that's been the plan from the get-go. But I'll double check and make sure that's the answer.
Okay, anything else?
For the moment, that's it.
Okay, Councilwoman Stoker.
So just going back to the deer problem, can a homeowner contact DWR and see if there's things they can't do as a property owner, or does the city have to get involved and get going through that? And then also, I really do think some definite answers need to be given to these people who are losing their gardens or their trees or whatever, and get this under control. And I don't know whether we need to get the deer study going so we can move forward, or at least have an answer for them that this is what's happening and when, and what their options are.
We'll ask those questions to DWR. They do have a landowner depredation permit system where farms or ranches that are experiencing damage from deer can be issued a certain number of their own tags that the owner then sells. However, I'm not sure that interfaces with a city that has maybe ordinances against use of firearms or bows in the city. So that's something we will find out from the DWR in our discussions, if that's even an option for a landowner to obtain depredation permits in the city.
I think it's required to be unincorporated.
Okay,
but
so
it also, the state is the one that imposes the 600-foot distance for firearms to structures. So that might be the hardest thing. But they might be able to go out there and set off a firework or, something like that. And I'm not saying, right, but there might be some thing they can do to drive them off, but that doesn't solve the city problem. It solves the immediate, deer in the yard problem.
So we'll find out on this as well when we talk to DWR again. Anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Satterthwaite.
On the 2750, I understand there's a section of that road, it's less than 100 feet, where the grading of the road is such that the road crowns in the middle, well, doesn't necessarily in the middle, but it all flows to the south, and then it gets to a point in the asphalt where now the asphalt goes back uphill to get to the curb. And I'm aware that Justin's told them about that's not code, that's not what it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And that's a part that I know they're Justin assured me the other day that they're going to replace that. The engineers are doing the work, and they're trying to decide whether the engineer or Bailey pays for it. But I'm not sure that they're going to replace that whole road. And we watched and counted as every one of those big swaths of road was taken out in order to get to our infrastructure. There's six, maybe seven large swaths across that road just between homies. I mean, it's in a matter of maybe less than 300 yards.
Well, I know, or I'm like 99% certain that we put into our public works standards that for a trench cut, the developer would have to pay under the thing I described a minute ago. The next time we were doing resurfacing, that area would be resurfaced. So I'm but certain that we do require that now. So we'll find out for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Because same thing, because there's so many of those little trenches across the city that were just filled in, and it compacts more than the road, and you get the dip. So we had put in a requirement. I'm almost certain to have an overlay done the next time. So we need to just follow up on that to make sure that got put in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like that feedback to come back to council. My recollection is that when they do a cut, that there's a certain cost that's based on the square footage or something about that cut that determines the cost that they have to pay when they get the permit. I'm uncertain of the details.
And then also having a full-time inspector, those cuts are more heavily regulated than they used to be in the past, because the inspector's dedicated to those cuts and dedicated to the utility improvements in subdivisions. So the compaction testing and thing is happening more frequently than it used to, because now we have a full-time person. So that helps, or it's helping, and it should help eliminate some of the dips that we've seen in the past. But I think the mayor's right that there's some additional money to cover a certain area for the next time we pave that goes into our repavement or repaving funds somehow. So
good. Our whole discussion about impact fees, while some might not think that it's related, I think and there's nobody here, that had specific interest tonight, so this would be for the benefit of the record, but the city has done a lot of work to determine what it costs to keep our infrastructure repaired and replaced and maintained. And we know that it's a significant amount, that it's several $1 million that we have made we've approved some additional fees to cover some of that, but we still have a significant amount and a great respect for what we still need to do. And there's some ties there, albeit impact fees are for growth. The same kind of rigor that I think we're trying to apply to be sure that we're on top of the cost to repair, replace, and maintain. We apply that rigor to the impact fee analysis, so we're sure that it really is covering our costs and that it's not covering too much. We need to ask all of those questions. Let's see, and finally, there's going to be a meeting this week. I'm not sure whether I'll come to it, but some of my neighbors were here about the spray situation up there on the park. The question is going to be, and maybe it'll eventually get to council, as to if there's some monies paid out. I can't help but think that where there's such a direct coincidence between the time of spray and the damage 2 years in a row, that we would just need to compensate them in some way. But most important, I think, is that we come up with a way so that next year this doesn't happen. I think it could and probably should cost us some. I don't know what I know the one family, there's a significant part of their garden that's gone. And while some may maintain that it didn't have anything to do with the spray,
sadly, that's the position of the sprayer.
Yeah.
So the one who applied the chemicals.
Well, and I think we need to explain to the residents that's part of the reality of it, but that we're going to take steps so that next year, we've resolved the problem.
And absolutely, John can keep you updated on it if you don't come to the meeting, but he'll have a report out of that discussion for all of you. Okay. Anything else?
I appreciated the way the beauty pageant and the emphasis on service and the whole person kind of a consideration for these young ladies. I applaud their efforts, and probably should have said that earlier, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And I have nothing further.
What? So there was when we talked about the detention basin on Green Acres, it was filled with water last week. A couple of days after that, my wife went by and there's a manhole out there that water was just bubbling up out of. She said,
in the park?
No, right there by the 2100. Yeah. So I don't know if that was because you were draining that that thing or what, but and I don't know what was causing it. She just said that water was just bubbling quite a bit out of that manhole.
It was drained several days after the storm, but I'm not sure
I don't know if that caused it because of draining it. Do you know if it's tied into that, John?
There's two outlets from that basin, and so we'd have to check with Dave Smith.
Normally, we
guy.
drain it out to 2600, the big basin out here. So I don't know if that's kind of in the direction you were seeing that.
I didn't see it.
Oh,
My wife
oh,
said
your
it was
wife's
on 20,
okay.
It was on 2100, where she saw that bubbling up, and talking about the detention basin on 2600. I've had a citizen contact me. Says that place stinks like crazy. That detention basin, because of the water that has gone down now, but it says it's stinking like crazy over there. So
This is the one.
Yeah, I believe it.
50.
It's got a lot of water every time it rains now. So normally it didn't.
But we don't have sewer and storm drain
No.
across here. do we?
No, it's
Swampy.
swamp. Yeah, that whole area is known for being a swamp, and yeah.
So is mosquito control coming out?
I'm not sure on that. Councilman
Earl's on the
Turner, our
board.
representative.
If you have a problem with mosquitoes, you call them, they'll come right out. I mean, it's you know, they don't watch a pond that.
Yeah, we shouldn't be having water, that long enough standing water to go through the larva cycle, but
Well, and if this is coming, the water, as Jim is saying, is coming up through the manhole, that means there's a blockage somewhere.
yeah,
in the
I'll
stream.
ask Dave to call you about that to try and troubleshoot what that was. I don't know, what that would have been exactly, but
when Vicky told me about it, I just assumed that it was maybe where it was draining the water out. And
it shouldn't be surfacing though. I mean, when we drain the water, it should just drain through the pipes and go on to the west, not bubbling up anywhere. So we'll find out and ask Dave to call you on it. Okay, anything else or a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned.
thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl wanted to have
10
the
o'clock.
agenda a little
Okay, is the
earlier.
meeting. Yeah. Oh, I
When they
think.
meet on the-
Oh, sorry. Go with the invite. Yeah, it was 11. We moved it